Emma sat at the corner booth of Joe's diner, her half-eaten plate of eggs and toast growing cold in front of her. It had been the perfect spot for someone like her, quiet, out of the way, where she wouldn't be noticed, and definitely where she wouldn't have to explain herself to anyone. The sounds of clinking silverware and low murmurs of conversation filled the room, but they felt so far away, like a distant hum of something she was no longer a part of. Graduation had come and gone the day before. The ceremony was over. The speeches, the caps tossed into the air, the promises of a future that everyone seemed so sure about, it was all behind her. And yet, here she was, alone. She had watched her classmates celebrate with their families, laughing, hugging, their joy bubbling over into the bright summer air. Emma, on the other hand, had quietly slipped out of the auditorium as soon as it ended, not wanting to stick around for the usual awkward goodbyes. She hadn't wanted to cry in front of anyone. "What's the point?" she muttered to herself, pushing the plate away. She wasn't hungry anyway. Emma picked up her phone, mindlessly scrolling through the notifications that had already piled up since she had woken up. Congratulations messages. Invitations to meet up. Funny memes from people she hadn't spoken to in months. And then there was Mia's text, a single sentence, "I'm proud of you, Em. Let's talk soon." Mia, her best friend. Or, at least, she had been. Emma dropped her phone on the table with a sigh. The distance between them had only grown since Mia left for college last year. And now, Emma didn't even know where she fit anymore. All her friends had their paths mapped out, some going off to college, others moving far away for jobs, internships, or new adventures. And then there was Emma, the one left behind, watching everyone else sprint ahead. "Have you figured out where you're going yet?" A voice asked, pulling Emma out of her thoughts. It was Joe, the owner of the diner, leaning against the counter and wiping his hands with a rag. He had been here for as long as she could remember, serving coffee to the regulars and putting up with people's complaints about the food. He had a kind face, with deep laugh lines and a warmth in his eyes that made you feel like you could tell him anything. She smiled weakly, shaking her head. "Not yet. I mean, not really. I guess I'm still figuring things out." "Yeah, well, you're not the only one," Joe chuckled, pouring himself a cup of coffee. "You've got time. But if you ever need advice on what to do next, I'm always here. Don't be a stranger, all right?" Emma nodded, but she didn't really hear him. What was the point in talking about the future when she had no idea what that even looked like? The idea of figuring things out, like everyone else seemed to be doing, felt like an impossible mountain to climb. She glanced at the clock. It was almost noon. Her parents had never been ones for grand celebrations or even minor acknowledgments, and they hadn't bothered to ask how she felt about graduation. They were probably at work, busy with their own lives, too preoccupied to care. Emma had learned early on not to expect much from them. As she sipped the lukewarm coffee in front of her, a sense of heaviness settled on her chest. She had always prided herself on being independent. She didn't need anyone, right? But as the diner buzzed around her, she couldn't ignore the gnawing feeling of being utterly alone. "Graduated and still no one to share it with," she whispered to herself, her voice barely audible over the clatter of plates and forks. She hated how bitter that sounded, but it was the truth. "Hey, kid." Joe's voice cut through the silence. Emma looked up, her eyes still distant. "Are you all right?" She offered a half smile. "Yeah, just tired. It's been a long few days." Joe nodded, but there was something in his gaze that lingered, like he knew there was more to the story than just exhaustion. He didn't press, though, and after a few moments, he walked back behind the counter to chat with one of the other regulars. The weight of it all settled on her again. The excitement of graduation was now a thing of the past, and Emma was left in its wake, unsure of where to go next. She wasn't exactly sure why she'd come to the diner in the first place. Maybe because it was the only place that felt safe. Maybe because it was the only place she wouldn't have to face the gaping void of her future, staring back at her like an unmarked road. As she sat there, wondering how long it would be until things finally started to feel right, a sudden sound broke her thoughts, soft, yet unmistakable. A tap. A tap on the window. Emma blinked, startled. Her gaze shifted toward the source of the sound. Standing outside the diner, at the window, was none other than Principal Harper. She could hardly believe her eyes. Principal Harper was the last person she expected to see, let alone here, in front of her. The tall, sharp-dressed man who always had a serious air about him was standing there, smiling faintly through the window. His presence alone was enough to send a strange flutter through Emma's chest. He wasn't one to visit the diner. Ever. And certainly not like this. Emma blinked again, uncertain of what to do. The noise of the diner seemed to fade into the background as she tried to figure out if this was some kind of strange coincidence or if something more was happening. And then, as if reading her mind, Principal Harper waved a hand in the air, signaling to her to open the window. Confusion wrinkled Emma's brow, but she stood up slowly, pushing her chair back. She got to the window and opened it, her eyes meeting his. "Principal Harper?" she asked, her voice hesitant, unsure of what was happening. "Mind if I come in for a second?" His voice was calm, reassuring, but there was something else in it, a seriousness that made Emma's heart race for reasons she couldn't quite explain. Sure," she said, stepping back. With a nod, the principal pushed the door open and walked inside, a little out of breath. He gave a small smile, though his eyes were intense, focused. "I hope I'm not disturbing you," he said, sliding into the booth across from her. Emma couldn't help but ask, her curiosity bubbling to the surface, "Why are you here?" He paused for a moment, eyes softening. "Because, Emma, I've been watching you for a while now. I think it's time we had a conversation." The unexpected visit from Principal Harper was just the beginning of what would turn into one of the most pivotal moments in Emma's life, and Emma had no idea yet how much everything was about to change. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The smell of coffee and stale pancakes mixed with the faint, almost imperceptible hum of the diner's neon sign buzzing above them. Emma sat in silence for a moment, still unsure of why Principal Harper was sitting across from her. She hadn't had a real conversation with him since the last school assembly when he'd given one of his usual speeches about integrity and hard work. She studied his face more carefully now, noticing the tiredness in his eyes and the slight lines around his mouth. It wasn't exactly a warm face, but it wasn't cold either. He looked like someone who had spent a lifetime balancing between two worlds, the world of rules and the world of the people who broke them. So Emma started, breaking the silence. Her fingers tapped nervously on the edge of her coffee cup. "What is this all about? I mean, I'm flattered, but I don't think I've done anything to earn a visit from the principal, right?" Principal Harper gave a small, understanding smile, but there was a seriousness in his eyes. "Emma, I've been following your time here at Whitestone High for the last few years. Not just your grades or achievements, but you. I think you're more than you give yourself credit for." Emma raised an eyebrow. "More than I give myself credit for? I'm just a student trying to get through high school without causing too much trouble. I don't know what you're seeing, but you're looking at the wrong person." It wasn't the first time Emma had dismissed compliments or recognition, especially from someone she barely knew. She wasn't used to being the center of attention, and whenever people noticed her, it always felt awkward. She'd much rather remain invisible, unnoticed, tucked away from the spotlight. Principal Harper's expression softened, though his gaze remained steady. "You'd be surprised at how often we miss the things that make us truly special. Maybe you don't know it, but I've seen something in you for a while." Emma felt a knot form in her stomach. It was uncomfortable, this feeling of being scrutinized, like someone was peeling back the layers of her life without asking for permission. She wasn't sure whether she wanted to hear more. "Can I ask you something?" she asked, trying to shift the focus away from her. "Why me? Why are you coming to me of all people?" The principal leaned back in the booth, folding his hands in front of him. He seemed to consider her question for a long moment before responding. "Because, Emma, I've been watching you. Not just in class, but in the halls, the way you walk around, the way you observe. You've always kept to yourself, but there's something about you. I see potential. A quiet strength that you don't even seem to realize is there." Emma shook her head, half smiling at what seemed like a compliment she didn't deserve. "You're giving me way too much credit. I'm just what?" Principal Harper interrupted. "A girl who sits in the back of the classroom? A girl who doesn't raise her hand in class or speak out. Emma, that's not who you are. I've seen you come through obstacles harder than most. I know you don't talk about it, but I've been around long enough to see the signs. You're capable of so much more than you give yourself credit for." His words hit her like a punch to the gut. The last thing she wanted was for someone to see past the walls she had carefully built over the years. Emma leaned forward, staring into her coffee cup, her fingers circling the rim as she tried to make sense of what he was saying. She wasn't used to praise, and she certainly wasn't used to the idea of someone looking at her like she had potential. Most of her life, she had felt like a shadow, existing on the edges of other people's stories. At home, she had learned to blend into the background. Her parents were loving, but distant. They were good people, but emotionally unavailable. It was hard to remember the last time they had sat down together for a real conversation. Her mom, Karen, was a successful businesswoman who was often too tired after work to engage in much more than basic pleasantries. Her dad, Thomas, worked long hours as a mechanic. Both of them had always been busy with work, busy with life, and busy with the things that mattered to them. But Emma, she had never felt like a priority. In some ways, it had been easier to live life in the margins than to force herself into the spotlight of their world. At school, Emma's life was hardly any different. She kept her head down, did her work, and kept her social circle small. Mia had been her closest friend, but even that had faded over time. Mia had left for college, and with her departure, Emma was left with no one. High school had never been about making lasting friendships. It had been about survival. And Emma had survived. "I don't know what you're seeing in me," Emma said quietly, "but I can tell you this much. I'm not that different from anyone else. I've got my flaws, my mistakes, and honestly, I'm just trying to figure out where I fit in this world. But I don't even know where to start." Principal Harper studied her, and for the first time, his face softened entirely. There was no professional mask, no stern authority, just an understanding person looking back at her. "That's the first step, Emma. Admitting that you don't have all the answers. Most people never get that far." She looked up, surprised by his words. "What do you mean?" He leaned in slightly, his voice a little quieter now, as if sharing something personal. "The moment you realize that you're still figuring things out, that's the moment you start growing. The trick isn't to have everything mapped out. The trick is to keep moving, even when you don't know where you're going. Most people are too afraid to take that first step because they don't know what's waiting for them. But you've already taken it." Emma paused, trying to process his words. She had never considered that she might be moving forward in any real way. She had just been floating, hoping to get through each day without too much turbulence. But now, in this moment, his words stirred something in her, something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years' hope. Principal Harper smiled, almost as if reading her mind. "I can see it, Emma. You've got something inside you. And I think it's time to bring it out into the world. I want you to think about this. You've got a choice. You can keep hiding in the background, letting life pass you by. Or you can step forward. You don't have to have all the answers. You just have to be willing to try." Emma sat there, her thoughts racing. For the first time, someone saw something in her that she hadn't seen in herself. Someone believed in her. And as strange as it felt, It was comforting. Okay, she said quietly, almost to herself. What do I do next? Principal Harper nodded, his smile deepening. That's the question, isn't it? And I think I might have just the thing for you. The principal's words hung in the air as Emma processed everything he had just said. Little did she know, this conversation would be the beginning of a journey that would challenge everything she thought she knew about herself. The air outside the diner was thick with humidity, as if summer was already trying to take hold of the world, wrapping everything in its sticky embrace. Emma stood at the door of Joe's diner, still reeling from her conversation with Principal Harper. She could feel the weight of his words pressing on her, but she wasn't sure whether they were a lifeline or a trap. You've got a choice, Emma. You can keep hiding in the background, or you can step forward. What did that even mean? Was it as simple as he made it sound? Just step forward? The more she thought about it, the more daunting it seemed. The idea of stepping into the spotlight, of confronting all the things she'd buried inside of her for so long, was terrifying. And yet, somewhere deep down, there was a flicker of curiosity. What if he was right? What if she could be more than just the girl who kept to herself? Emma took a deep breath and stepped out of the diner, the bell above the door jingling softly behind her. The world outside felt a little too big, a little too loud, as if everything she had ignored in the past few years was suddenly rushing toward her. She pulled her jacket tighter around her shoulders and started walking aimlessly down the sidewalk. Her thoughts kept drifting back to Principal Harper. What had he meant by, I think I might have just the thing for you? What kind of thing? Was he offering her a chance to do something important? Something that could change her life? Or was it just another one of those empty promises adults like to give to keep you from asking too many questions? Emma's phone buzzed in her pocket, pulling her out of her spiral. She pulled it out, half expecting it to be another congratulatory message or a reminder of something she had long since forgotten. But no, it was a text from Mia. I saw your post on Instagram. I know it's been a weird few months, but I'm really proud of you. Let's catch up soon. Emma's stomach tightened. Mia had been her closest friend for as long as she could remember, but after Mia left for college last year, everything changed. They used to talk every day, share their fears, their dreams, their silly inside jokes. Now, Mia had become this distant figure, someone who seemed to be moving on while Emma stayed stuck in place. Sure, let's talk soon. Emma typed the reply and hit send before she could second-guess herself. There was a small sense of relief that came with reconnecting, even if it was just a text. Mia had always been her safety net, the one person who understood her completely. The idea of seeing her again, of feeling like herself with someone who cared, gave her a sense of comfort. But even that wasn't enough to stop the gnawing feeling in her gut, the feeling that she was missing something important, that she wasn't doing enough to move forward. As she continued walking down the street, her mind drifted back to Principal Harper's words. What was this thing he wanted her to do? It didn't take long for her to spot the familiar, imposing silhouette of Whitestone High looming ahead of her. She didn't even realize she had been walking in that direction until she was standing at the edge of the school's campus, staring up at the building where she had spent the last 4 years of her life. The windows of the school reflected the late afternoon sun, giving the whole structure a golden glow, like it was beckoning her. Without thinking, Emma stepped onto the school grounds. She had no plan, no purpose, but something in her felt drawn here. The school had always been a place of mixed emotions. On one hand, it was where she had earned her way to graduation, gotten through the relentless grind of assignments, and survived endless days of feeling invisible. But on the other hand, it was a place where she had hidden from herself, kept her true feelings buried, and avoided confronting the messiness of who she was. As she walked closer to the main building, she noticed the old oak tree where she and Mia had spent so many hours talking about everything and nothing. The tree was still there, its branches heavy with the promise of another summer, another set of memories to be made. Emma stood in front of it, her heart pounding. Maybe this is the sign, she thought. Maybe this is where it starts. the stepping forward. And yet, as she reached out to touch the rough bark of the tree, a wave of doubt washed over her. She wasn't sure if she could handle whatever this thing was that Principal Harper had in mind for her. What if it was too much? What if she failed? She had already spent so much of her life on the sidelines. Could she really break out of that role now? Her phone buzzed again, snapping her out of her thoughts. This time, it was a call. "Hello." Emma answered, her voice wavering slightly, still unsure of what she was about to hear. "Emma, it's Principal Harper." The voice on the other end of the line was steady, confident, just like it had been when he was sitting across from her in the diner. "I'm glad you're still thinking about what we talked about. I need you to meet me at the school tomorrow afternoon. We have something important to discuss. Something that I think will give you the push you've been needing." Emma felt her breath catch in her throat. "What is it?" There was a pause on the other end, and then Harper's voice lowered, almost as if he was sharing a secret. "I can't explain it all over the phone. Just trust me, Emma. You'll know when you see it. Tomorrow, 2 p.m. Be there." Before she could respond, the line went dead. Emma stood there in stunned silence for a moment, her phone still pressed against her ear. 1,000 thoughts raced through her mind. What could be so important that he couldn't tell her over the phone? And why her? She hadn't exactly been a standout student, and the last time she had talked to Harper was during a routine assembly. There was no reason for him to want to involve her in something, was there? And yet, deep down, she couldn't deny the excitement that was starting to build in her chest. Maybe this was it. Maybe this was the moment everything changed. Maybe it was time to stop hiding. The following day, Emma spent the morning in a haze of nervous energy. She kept replaying the conversation with Principal Harper over and over in her head, trying to imagine what he could want from her. Was it an opportunity? A scholarship? A project? She had no idea, but the more she thought about it, the more she felt like this was a turning point in her life. She wasn't sure if she was ready for what awaited her, but one thing was clear: there was no turning back now. The day felt impossibly long. Every minute dragged as Emma waited for the clock to tick closer to 2 p.m. Her mind was on fire with curiosity, anxiety, and anticipation all mixed together. What was Principal Harper going to reveal to her? The questions kept piling up, each one more pressing than the last. By the time the hands of her watch aligned at 1:50, Emma was already standing in front of Whitestone High, her footsteps echoing in the quiet schoolyard. The building loomed above her like an old, silent guardian. Everything around her felt oddly familiar, yet different. The usual routine of school seemed so far away now, like it belonged to a past life that no longer fit who she was becoming. She hesitated for a moment at the gates, wondering whether she should just turn around and head home. What if it was some kind of mistake? What if she wasn't ready for whatever Harper had in mind? But then, remembering the brief conversation yesterday, the words of encouragement, the confidence in Harper's voice, Emma felt something in her stir. Something that said maybe this is what you need. Stepping through the gates, she walked briskly toward the administration building, the place where the principal's office was located. The air seemed charged with the anticipation she couldn't quite shake. Every step felt like a leap toward something bigger than herself. As she reached the entrance, Emma paused to steady her breathing. The door to the office opened with a soft creak, and Principal Harper appeared, just as calm and composed as ever. He gave her a small nod, almost as if he had been expecting her all along. "Emma," he greeted her warmly. "I'm glad you made it. Please come inside." Emma followed him into the building, her nerves now fully alive. The familiar scent of wood and old textbooks lingered in the air, reminding her of long, silent study sessions. It felt strangely comforting, yet her heart was pounding in her chest. What could this meeting be about? Harper led her through the hallway and into a conference room just off the main office. It was small but cozy, large windows that let in the afternoon light, a polished wooden table, a few chairs around it. Harper motioned for her to sit down. Thank you for coming on such short notice, he began, sitting across from her. His eyes met hers, and there was no trace of the usual administrative distance he maintained with the rest of the students. This was different. This was personal. What I'm about to tell you might feel a little strange, but I want you to keep an open mind. What I'm offering you isn't something I give to just anyone. But I believe you're ready. Emma sat up straighter, her pulse quickening. What do you mean? What are you offering? Harper leaned forward, folding his hands together. Emma, you've always been a quiet observer. You've seen the world around you, but you've never let it define you. You've never allowed yourself to be defined by anyone else's expectations. That's rare. Most students, heck, most people are too busy trying to fit in. You've managed to keep your independence, your sense of self, in a way that very few others can. Emma blinked, surprised. She had never seen herself that way before. To her, she was just ordinary, quiet, invisible. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm not anything special. Harper smiled, the corners of his eyes crinkling slightly. That's exactly it. You think you're ordinary, but there's something in you that most people don't have. And I want to offer you a chance to explore that, something that could change your life. Something that could put you on a path to truly understanding your potential. Emma sat frozen, her mind racing. Was this some sort of mentorship opportunity? A scholarship? She didn't know what to make of it, but the growing excitement in her chest was impossible to ignore. I'm listening, she said, her voice a little shakier than she intended. Harper stood and walked over to a file cabinet in the corner of the room, pulling out a thick manila folder. He placed it gently in front of her, and Emma's eyes caught the gold lettering on the front, Whitestone Leadership Program. This, Harper said, gesturing to the folder, is something I've been working on for a while. It's an exclusive program for students with leadership potential. It's not just about grades, Emma. It's about seeing something beyond the classroom, beyond the walls of the school. I want to give you a chance to develop that potential. To lead. Emma's head was spinning. She hadn't considered herself a leader. She didn't even know if she had it in her to be one. Sure, she had done well in school, but that was different. Leadership wasn't just about getting good grades. It was about stepping forward, taking risks, and making decisions. She wasn't sure she was ready for that. But Harper's steady gaze urged her to keep listening. This program, Emma, will push you. It will challenge everything you thought you knew about yourself. But I believe you have the capacity to grow, to lead others, to take on challenges you never thought possible. Emma stared at the folder, the weight of his words sinking in. She wanted to protest, to tell him that she wasn't cut out for something like this. But a small part of her, one that she hadn't listened to in a long time, was starting to wonder what it would be like to take a chance. To step forward. Harper continued. There will be tasks, projects, and responsibilities. You'll be asked to work with other students, push yourself to your limits, and lead. But I'm not offering this to just anyone. I'm offering it to you because I think you have something others don't. You've got the heart, Emma. You just need to learn how to use it. Emma's hands trembled slightly as she reached for the folder. Her fingers brushed the edges of the manila paper, the challenge before her beginning to feel more real with every passing second. I don't know, she said, her voice uncertain. What if I fail? What if I can't do it? Harper smiled again, this time more gently. That's the beauty of this, Emma. No one succeeds without failure. It's how you grow. And I believe you can grow into something extraordinary. But only if you're willing to try. For the first time in what felt like forever, Emma felt something inside her stir, a sense of possibility she hadn't allowed herself to feel before. Maybe she was more than just the quiet girl at the back of the room. Maybe there was something inside her worth exploring. I'll do it, Emma said quietly, her voice firming with resolve. Harper's smile widened. I'm glad to hear that, Emma. Tomorrow, we begin. The following morning, Emma woke up with a feeling she couldn't quite name, like there was a knot deep in her stomach that had been there for days, tightening with every passing hour. Today was the first day of the Whitestone Leadership Program. And while a part of her was excited about the opportunity Harper had given her, another part of her felt a deep, suffocating anxiety. She was stepping into something unknown, something bigger than herself. It was overwhelming. She dressed quickly, pulling on a simple pair of jeans and a hoodie. The weather was warm, but she didn't feel like wearing anything that would make her stand out. If she was going to take on something this huge, she wanted to disappear into the background as much as possible. She had always preferred blending in, avoiding attention. The idea of leading others, being at the front, taking charge, felt like an impossible task. By the time Emma arrived at school, she was a bundle of nerves, her heart racing and her palms sweating. She walked slowly toward the administration building, her footsteps echoing in the quiet morning air. Everything felt different today. The school, which had once been so familiar, now felt like a maze of uncertainty. Inside the administration building, Harper was waiting for her. He looked calm, as always, but there was a sense of quiet excitement in his eyes. It was clear he believed in her more than she believed in herself. "Good morning, Emma," he greeted her warmly. "Ready for your first day?" Emma forced a smile, though her throat felt dry. "I guess so." Harper gave her an encouraging nod and motioned for her to follow him. "Come on, let's get started. You'll be meeting the other students today, and we'll go over the program structure. Don't worry, I'm here to guide you every step of the way." As they walked through the halls, Emma tried to focus on the sound of her footsteps rather than the pounding in her chest. She could feel the eyes of the few students that passed by her, and it made her want to shrink back into the shadows. She wasn't used to being noticed, and this kind of attention was unsettling. It felt like everyone knew something she didn't. Finally, Harper stopped outside a large room at the end of the hall, one she'd never been in before. The door was wide open, and inside, several students were gathered around a long conference table. They were all talking in low voices, laughing and exchanging notes. Some were familiar faces from her class, others were strangers. "This is your group," Harper said, his voice firm but gentle. "These students will be your team for the next few months. They'll challenge you, and you'll challenge them. This is where the real work begins." Emma's heart skipped a beat. A team? She hadn't been part of a team in years, not since middle school. In high school, she had always been a loner, focusing on her studies, keeping to herself. The idea of being part of a group, of leading others, made her stomach churn. She stepped into the room, her footsteps hesitant. The moment she entered, every conversation seemed to halt. All eyes turned toward her. Her pulse quickened, and she tried to ignore the flush creeping up her neck. They were all looking at her, sizing her up. Emma felt the weight of their gazes like a heavy burden, and she instinctively shifted her weight from one foot to the other. "Everyone, this is Emma," Harper said. "She's a part of this team now, and she'll be working with you throughout the program." There was a moment of silence before one of the students, a tall girl with short blonde hair, spoke up. "Hey, welcome to the group. I'm Jess," she said, giving Emma a wide smile. Her voice was friendly, but Emma couldn't help but feel like it was forced, like there was an underlying pressure to perform in this new role she had no idea how to handle. "Hi," Emma replied, her voice barely above a whisper. She gave Jess a small nod before looking around the room at the others. Most of them were older than her, with more experience, more confidence. They seemed so together. Emma felt completely out of place. Harper clapped his hands together, drawing everyone's attention. "All right, let's get started. Emma, I know this might feel overwhelming, but remember, this program is about growth. We're not here to make things easy. We're here to push you, to break down the barriers you've built up for yourself. And we're here to do it together." His words were meant to inspire, but Emma could barely hear them over the storm of self-doubt crashing through her mind. Am I really ready for this? What if I can't handle it? What if they all realize I don't belong here? Jess and the others began to discuss their goals for the program, but Emma's mind wandered. She could feel the weight of their expectations pressing down on her, and it was suffocating. She had agreed to this. She had taken the first step. But now that she was here, she didn't know if she could follow through. What if the cracks in her self-confidence were too deep to fix? Then, as if sensing her anxiety, Harper spoke again, his voice softer this time. Emma, I want you to take a moment and breathe. I know you're feeling overwhelmed, but you don't have to do this alone. We're all here for you, and we're in this together. The most important thing is that you believe in yourself. Everything else will come after that. Those words, believe in yourself, echoed in her mind, repeating over and over. Could she really do it? Could she truly step up and be the leader she had never allowed herself to be? Before she could answer herself, Harper continued, For today, I want you to focus on one thing. I want you to step out of your comfort zone. Do one thing today that scares you. It doesn't have to be big, but I want you to push yourself, just a little. Emma swallowed hard. Just a little. The idea sounded simple, but to her, it felt like an impossible task. Every inch of her body screamed to retreat, to stay in the shadows where it was safe. But for the first time in her life, she didn't want to retreat. She didn't want to be invisible anymore. The afternoon was spent with exercises that pushed Emma further out of her comfort zone. Small group discussions, leadership tasks, and problem-solving scenarios that forced her to speak up, to lead, to take charge in ways she never thought possible. Each time she found herself speaking, even if it was just a simple suggestion, she felt her confidence building, just a little bit more. But there was one moment, one turning point, that made everything come crashing down. During an intense brainstorming session, Emma was asked to take the lead on organizing a presentation for a future school event. As she stood up to speak, her hands shook and her mind went blank. She felt all eyes on her again, waiting for her to perform, to deliver. Her throat tightened, and the words wouldn't come. Emma? Jess's voice was gentle but firm, urging her to take control. But Emma couldn't. The pressure of it all, the eyes on her, the weight of their expectations, became too much. She backed away from the group, her face flushed with embarrassment. I can't do this. And just like that, all the hope she had built up crumbled. The room went silent. For a moment, Emma stood there, her heart racing, her hands still trembling. Her worst fear of failing, of not being good enough, had come true. She had let them down. She had let herself down. Harper, who had been watching from the side, stepped forward. Emma, he said, his voice surprisingly calm, this is the moment. This is where we figure out who we really are. She looked up at him, tears welling in her eyes, her frustration bubbling over. I can't do it. I thought I could, but I can't. I'm not a leader. I'm just a nobody. Harper's gaze softened. You're not a nobody, Emma. You're just human. And that's the most important thing. Leadership isn't about perfection. It's about learning from your mistakes, picking yourself up, and continuing to move forward. You're not alone in this. Emma stood there for a long moment, feeling the weight of his words settle in her chest. Slowly, as the tears began to dry, she realized something. The journey wasn't about perfection. It was about progress. And this moment would be the first step. The days after the emotional meltdown in the leadership group felt like a blur to Emma. Each one seemed to drag on endlessly, yet at the same time, they passed too quickly. She barely remembered leaving the meeting room that afternoon, her head spinning with shame, embarrassment, and a deep sense of defeat. She had failed, not just in front of the others, but in front of herself. For someone who had spent most of her life avoiding attention, stepping into the spotlight only to stumble felt like the ultimate betrayal of everything she had hoped for. But something happened in the days that followed. It wasn't immediate, and it wasn't dramatic. There was no grand epiphany, no sudden burst of confidence. It was something quieter, a slow, steady shift inside her. The first small change came when she entered the leadership room the following Monday. The group's eyes were on her, but this time, there was no judgment in them. Jess flashed her a warm, reassuring smile, and the others nodded politely as if to say, "We've got you." Harper had given her a few words of encouragement in private that morning, reminding her that failure wasn't the end of the road, but simply part of the process. He didn't give up on her, even when she had given up on herself. Still, Emma felt hesitant. Every word she spoke in group discussions was weighed down by the ghost of that afternoon. What if they see me as a failure? What if they think I'm not cut out for this? She couldn't shake the feeling that all of her insecurities were hanging over her like a storm cloud, just waiting to burst. But little by little, things started to change. One afternoon, the group was tasked with creating a proposal for a community event, something that would involve planning, team coordination, and presenting ideas to a panel of school officials. The group was split into pairs, and Emma was paired with a girl named Lila, who was surprisingly easy to talk to. Lila had a natural charm, a confidence that Emma envied, but she was also patient and willing to listen. As they started brainstorming ideas for the event, Emma found herself speaking up more than usual. She suggested themes for the event, potential locations, and even offered input on how they could involve the school's art department. To her surprise, Lila was receptive to every idea, even the ones Emma thought were too simple or too far-fetched. "You've got some good ideas, Emma," Lila said, flashing her a sincere smile. "I think we can make this work. You're more creative than you give yourself credit for." Emma's face flushed slightly. Did she really mean that? Before she could dwell on it too long, Lila pushed forward, grabbing the whiteboard markers and starting to sketch out a plan. The two of them worked late into the afternoon, bouncing ideas back and forth, organizing everything into neat lists, and refining their proposal. By the time the meeting ended, Emma realized something she hadn't noticed before. She was no longer afraid of speaking up. With Lila's encouragement, her ideas felt valid. She was contributing. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. It was progress. That night, as Emma lay in bed, she thought back to what Harper had said. Leadership isn't about perfection. It's about learning from your mistakes and moving forward. For the first time, she understood what he meant. It wasn't about getting everything right. It was about trying, failing, and trying again. The following week, Harper called the group together to review their progress on the proposal. As Emma sat there, listening to the others present their ideas, she felt a shift within herself. She didn't feel like an outsider anymore. She didn't feel like the girl who didn't belong. When it was her turn to present their proposal with Lila, Emma stood a little taller, her nerves a little calmer. The words flowed more easily than they had in the past. She glanced at the panel of teachers sitting at the front, but instead of feeling intimidated, she saw it for what it was, a simple opportunity to share what they'd worked on. It wasn't a test. It was just a step in the process. She spoke clearly, confidently, and when they were finished, the teachers gave them a round of applause. It wasn't an over-the-top response, but it was enough to make Emma feel like she'd done something right. She had contributed to something that mattered. That night, she received an email from Harper, thanking her for her effort and offering more praise than she'd expected. The email was short, but it carried an enormous weight. "Great job today, Emma. I saw a lot of growth in you. Keep it up, you're on the right path." Emma stared at the email for a long time before finally closing her laptop. She felt something that she hadn't felt in a long time: pride. The feeling was small at first, like a flicker of light in the darkness. But as she sat there, A slow smile spread across her face. Maybe, just maybe, she wasn't a failure after all. Over the next few weeks, Emma began to grow more comfortable in the program. She still had moments of doubt, of course. There were still times when she felt overwhelmed or unsure. But there were fewer of those moments, and the ones that came were easier to push through. Every time she stepped out of her comfort zone, it felt less terrifying. Every time she spoke in front of the group or presented an idea, it felt a little more natural. And then came the day of the big event, the one that would define the success of the entire leadership program. The community event proposal that Emma had worked on with Lila had finally come to fruition. The day had arrived. The event was held in the school's gymnasium, decorated with the theme they had chosen, a celebration of community and connection. There were booths for local charities, performances by students, and interactive activities for families. It was more than Emma had ever imagined. The project that had once seemed impossible now stood before her, tangible and real. And she was going to lead it. Emma walked into the gymnasium that morning, taking a deep breath. The final preparations were in full swing, and there was a buzz of excitement in the air. Students and teachers worked together to set up tables, hang banners, and organize activities. As she walked through the gym, Emma's heart swelled with pride. She had played a part in making this happen. She had led this. When the event finally began, Emma stood near the entrance, greeting guests and ensuring everything ran smoothly. She wasn't just participating anymore. She was actively leading, solving problems as they arose, making sure the day went off without a hitch. Halfway through the event, Harper found her in the middle of coordinating some last-minute changes to the schedule. "Emma," he said, his voice calm but filled with approval. "I've been watching you all day. You've grown so much since you first walked into this program. This is what leadership looks like." Emma turned to him, a smile tugging at her lips. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like a fraud. She didn't feel like she was pretending to be something she wasn't. She was leading. She was here. And she belonged. The community event was a success beyond Emma's expectations. The gym was buzzing with laughter and conversation, filled with families, students, and teachers who had come to show their support. The booths were stocked with handmade crafts, the food trucks were crowded with customers, and a stage had been set up for student performances. It was everything Emma had imagined and more. Yet, as the event began to wind down, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that something was looming on the horizon. Something bigger. In the days following the event, Emma received numerous congratulations. Teachers praised her for her initiative, classmates complimented her leadership, and even parents expressed their gratitude for the program. But for all the praise, a quiet voice in Emma's mind kept repeating the same thing: this isn't over yet. The leadership program wasn't about one event, one success. There was more to it, and she knew it. There was still a long way to go, and she would need to keep pushing herself further. The next meeting of the Whitestone Leadership Program felt different. There was an energy in the room, an undercurrent of excitement, but also an undeniable sense of pressure. Harper was standing at the front of the room, a serious expression on his face, holding a manila folder in his hands. "All right, everyone, let's get started," he said, his voice cutting through the buzz of conversation. "I've got some exciting news. Starting next week, you will all be taking on leadership roles for the school's upcoming charity auction. You will each be responsible for organizing one aspect of the event. This is going to be your biggest challenge yet. If you can pull this off, you'll prove you have what it takes to be a true leader." Emma's stomach twisted at the mention of the charity auction. She had been to the auction before, but had never been involved in organizing it. It was one of the most important events of the school year. There was no room for mistakes. Harper went on to explain the details of the auction. Each student would be assigned a different area to oversee, such as coordinating the volunteers, securing auction items, arranging the event space, or managing the marketing efforts. The event was expected to raise thousands of dollars for various local charities, and it was Emma's responsibility to make sure everything went smoothly. "We'll be giving you a lot of freedom with your responsibilities," Harper continued. "This is a real test of your leadership abilities. But don't forget, the real challenge is learning to trust your team and to ask for help when you need it." Emma felt the weight of those words sink in. She wasn't just planning another event or running a simple program. This was a school-wide event with high expectations, and she would be responsible for overseeing a major component of it. The pressure felt suffocating. The next few days were a blur of phone calls, emails, and meetings. Emma had been assigned to manage the marketing efforts for the charity auction, which meant designing promotional materials, organizing social media posts, and ensuring the event reached the right audience. It was a lot, but Emma had learned from her past experiences. She knew how to keep things organized, how to keep track of deadlines. Still, the scope of it was overwhelming. Her team of volunteers was mostly made up of underclassmen, some of whom had little to no experience with event planning. Emma found herself in the difficult position of trying to direct them, of keeping them on task, while also staying calm under the mounting pressure. It wasn't easy. It was hard to balance the need for perfection with the reality that things might not go as planned. One day, as she was overseeing the production of posters for the event, Emma's phone buzzed with a new email from Harper. She quickly opened it, her heart sinking as she read. "Emma, I've just learned that the venue for the auction may not be available due to a scheduling conflict. I'll need you to find an alternative location as soon as possible. Let me know if you need any help." Harper. The news hit Emma like a ton of bricks. The venue was the heart of the entire event. Without it, everything could fall apart. She quickly scanned her options. The backup venues she had researched were either unavailable or too small to accommodate the crowd they were expecting. Her mind raced as she brainstormed a solution. She could feel the panic rising in her chest, but she forced herself to stay calm. She couldn't let her team down. She couldn't let Harper down. Within hours, she had called every possible venue in town. Most were booked for that night. But finally, she received a call back from a local hotel with a large conference room that was available at the last minute. It was a bit more expensive than their original location, but it would work. Emma secured the booking and immediately emailed Harper with the update. The day of the auction arrived, and Emma stood at the entrance to the event space, checking everything over once again. The venue had been transformed into something beautiful, streamers hanging from the ceiling, tables full of auction items, and volunteers bustling around to make sure everything was perfect. The excitement was palpable, but so was the anxiety. Emma could feel the weight of responsibility pressing down on her, but she knew she couldn't let it show. The night kicked off without any major problems, and for a while, everything ran smoothly. The guests arrived in droves, eager to bid on the items, and the atmosphere was festive and lively. Emma's team was on top of things, but as the evening wore on, small issues began to arise. A few items were misplaced, some volunteers were running behind on their tasks, and the flow of the event started to slow down. Emma could feel the pressure mounting, but she refused to show weakness. She kept moving, solving problems as they came up, and pushing herself to make sure the auction was a success. But by the time the auction started winding down, Emma felt like she could collapse. She hadn't had time to eat or even sit down for more than a few minutes. She was exhausted, emotionally drained, and physically spent. As the last bids were placed and the final thank yous were made, Harper found her in the crowd, a smile on his face. "Emma, you did it." The event was a success. The auction raised over $20,000 for charity, and it was all because of your leadership. Emma's legs felt like jelly as she looked around the room. The event had gone better than she'd expected. The charity auction was a huge success. The feeling of relief washed over her like a wave. But even as she stood there, a sense of doubt lingered at the back of her mind. Thank you, Harper, she said quietly, her voice full of exhaustion. But I couldn't have done it alone. My team, everyone really stepped up. It was a group effort. Harper's smile softened, and he placed a hand on her shoulder. You led them, Emma. You pulled it all together. You showed them what it means to be a leader. For the first time in her life, Emma felt like she had earned the title. Leadership wasn't about doing everything perfectly or handling everything by yourself. It was about trusting your team, finding solutions when things went wrong, and taking responsibility for the outcome, good or bad. And tonight, Emma had done just that. She had taken on the weight of responsibility, and she had risen to the occasion. The excitement of the charity auction was short-lived. The adrenaline from organizing such a monumental event had quickly worn off, leaving Emma with a deep sense of exhaustion. Despite the praise from her peers and Harper, there was something heavier weighing on her now. She felt a sense of unease creeping into her chest. The next day, her inbox was flooded with thank you emails and feedback forms, but it was the email from her parents that made her pause. Emma, we're so proud of everything you're doing, but we're a little worried. You've been so busy lately, and we haven't seen much of you. How's everything going? We miss you. Love, Mom and Dad. Emma sat in front of her laptop for a long moment, staring at the words. She had been so caught up in proving herself to Harper, to the program, to everyone around her, that she had neglected the people who mattered most. Her parents had always been supportive, but Emma knew they were concerned. She hadn't been home much, hadn't spent time with them in weeks. The guilt crept in, wrapping itself around her heart. What had happened to the girl who used to make time for her family? But just as quickly, the guilt was replaced by a sense of urgency. There was always something to do. Her leadership role wasn't over yet, far from it. There were still meetings to attend, decisions to be made, and expectations to meet. She closed her laptop and took a deep breath. The leadership program was her chance to prove herself. She couldn't afford to fail now. The next few days passed in a blur of tasks and responsibilities. The leadership group had already started planning for the next big event, a school-wide campaign to promote mental health awareness. It was an initiative Emma felt strongly about, given the challenges she had faced in her own life. She was eager to get started, but as the days wore on, she found herself struggling to keep up with the increasing pressure. At school, she juggled meetings with teachers, brainstorming sessions with the leadership team, and organizing schedules for the upcoming campaign. At home, her parents tried to make plans with her, but Emma found herself canceling more often than not, too tired or too busy to spend time with them. She knew they understood, but that didn't stop the guilt from gnawing at her. One evening, after another late night of planning and texting with her team, Emma found herself standing in front of her bedroom mirror, staring at her reflection. The exhaustion was written all over her face, dark circles under her eyes, shoulders slumped from the weight of it all. She hardly recognized the girl in the mirror anymore. She had become someone who was always running, always striving for more, never stopping to take a breath. Is this really worth it? The question popped into her head uninvited. Emma didn't have an answer. The following morning, Emma met with her leadership group to discuss the mental health awareness campaign. She had been assigned the responsibility of organizing the campaign's social media presence, creating posts, scheduling content, and promoting the initiative. It wasn't a small task, but Emma had handled similar responsibilities before. She could do this. As the group gathered in the meeting room, Jess spoke up. Okay, everyone, we're going to break into smaller teams and figure out the specific roles we need to fill. Emma, I know you've been doing a lot already, but we could really use your help with getting the social media pushed together. We need to make sure we get the word out effectively. Emma nodded, though the words felt heavy. I'm already doing so much. But she didn't voice the thought. She couldn't. She couldn't be the one to say no, not when so many people were counting on her. I'll take care of it, Emma said, pushing down the knot of anxiety forming in her stomach. The days turned into a blur of photo shoots, graphic design work, and drafting social media posts. Emma worked late into the night, sacrificing her sleep to make sure everything was perfect. But as the campaign began to pick up steam, she realized she was falling behind in other areas of her life. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, pulling her out of the haze of exhaustion she had found herself in. It was a text from Harper. "Emma, I know you're busy, but I just wanted to check in. How's the campaign going? Do you need any help?" She looked at the message for a long moment, her mind racing. She could feel the weight of everything pressing down on her. It was like she was holding so many pieces together, but the puzzle kept growing more complex, more fragile. One wrong move, one missed deadline, and it could all fall apart. With a deep sigh, Emma typed a quick reply. "It's going well, Harper. Just a lot going on right now, but I'm handling it. Thanks for checking in." But even as she sent the message, she knew she wasn't handling it. She was barely keeping it together. She had stretched herself too thin, and the cracks were beginning to show. The following week, the stress reached a breaking point. Emma was sitting in a meeting with her group when she felt her body suddenly go tense. Her breathing quickened, and she felt a tightness in her chest. For a moment, she thought she might pass out. She quickly excused herself, saying she needed to take a quick break. She stepped into the hallway, her heart racing. What is happening to me? The question echoed in her mind. She had always prided herself on staying strong, on being in control. But this was different. She wasn't in control. She was struggling to breathe, struggling to keep it all together. Her hands shook as she leaned against the wall, trying to steady herself. She had reached the limit. Later that day, Emma found herself sitting in Harper's office. He had asked her to come in for a one-on-one discussion, and despite her nerves, she knew this was a conversation she needed to have. Harper looked up from his desk as she entered. "Emma, come in. Take a seat." She sat down, feeling like the weight of the world was on her shoulders. Harper looked at her for a moment, studying her carefully. "I've noticed something lately," he said gently. "You've been pushing yourself too hard. You're doing great work, but you're running yourself ragged. Are you okay?" Emma opened her mouth to speak, but the words wouldn't come. She had spent so much time convincing herself she could handle it all, but now, sitting in front of Harper, the truth felt too raw. I'm not okay," she finally said, her voice trembling. "I'm overwhelmed. I'm trying to keep up with everything, school, the leadership program, my family, and I feel like I'm failing at all of it. I don't know how to fix it." Harper leaned forward, his tone soft but firm. "Emma, you don't have to fix everything yourself. Leadership isn't about doing it all. It's about learning when to ask for help and when to take a step back. You've already proven you can lead, but now it's time to show yourself some grace. You don't have to carry it all alone." That conversation with Harper marked a turning point for Emma. It wasn't an easy pill to swallow, but it was a necessary one. She had spent so much time trying to be perfect, trying to prove herself to everyone around her, that she had lost sight of what mattered most, her well-being. Emma knew that to be the leader she wanted to be, she needed to take care of herself first. She couldn't pour from an empty cup. And it was time to ask for help, not just from Harper, but from those around her. She didn't have to do it alone. After her conversation with Harper, Emma found herself reflecting more deeply on what he had said. Leadership wasn't about doing everything yourself. It was about understanding when to ask for help and recognizing that self-care was crucial to maintaining your effectiveness. She had always been so determined to prove her worth, to be the best at everything, that she had neglected the most important thing, her health and her happiness. For the first time in weeks, Emma gave herself permission to rest. It wasn't easy. Her to-do list still loomed large, and there were a dozen things that needed her attention. But as she stood in front of her desk, staring at the pile of papers, something inside her shifted. She could feel her body resisting, urging her to go, to push through. But she stood her ground. She reached for her phone and sent a text to her leadership team. "Hey everyone, I need to take a step back for a bit. I'm feeling really overwhelmed, and I want to make sure the campaign is done well, so I'm going to trust you all to take charge for a few days. Please keep me in the loop, and I'll be available if you need me, but I need to recharge. Thank you for understanding." It felt strange to send. She had never admitted to needing a break before, but the relief that followed was immediate. She wasn't abandoning her team. She was just being responsible about taking care of herself. She followed up with a call to her parents. The guilt that had weighed her down since she'd read their last message began to lift as soon as they picked up. "Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad. I'm sorry I've been distant lately. I've just been swamped with school and the leadership program. I'm really overwhelmed right now." Her mom's voice was warm and understanding. "We've been worried about you, honey, but we're glad you're reaching out. You need to take care of yourself, okay? We'll be here when you're ready to come home." Emma felt a lump in her throat, but she smiled, realizing that even though she had been away, her family's love and support had never wavered. "Thanks, Mom. I will. I promise." The next few days were a strange mix of relief and anxiety. Emma had always been someone who prided herself on being in control, but she had learned the hard way that perfection wasn't sustainable. As she focused on resting, she also realized just how much she had neglected the things that mattered most: her family, her friendships, and her own well-being. She spent more time with her parents, cooking dinner together and catching up on their lives. She took long walks in the park, letting the fresh air clear her mind. She even found herself reconnecting with friends she hadn't spoken to in weeks. It was a refreshing change of pace, one that allowed her to reconnect with herself and the people she loved. Her friends, especially Jess, were understanding when she told them she needed some time to recharge. They offered their support without hesitation, telling her to take all the time she needed and reassuring her that the campaign would continue without her micromanaging every step. By the time the weekend arrived, Emma felt more grounded. She had learned something important during her brief respite. Taking care of herself didn't mean she was letting others down. In fact, by prioritizing her health, she would be able to give more to her team, her family, and herself in the long run. As she sat down to work on the mental health campaign again, she approached it with a clearer head and a renewed sense of purpose. She still had a lot of work to do, but now she was ready to delegate more, to trust her team, and to ask for help when she needed it. It wasn't just about leading the campaign anymore, it was about leading herself, too. The next meeting with the leadership group was a turning point. Emma walked into the room with a calmness that surprised her. Her usual anxiety and perfectionism were still there, but they had been tempered by a newfound sense of balance. "All right, team," she said, standing at the front of the room. "I'm back, and I feel like I can finally give this my all again. But before we dive in, I just want to say thank you for your understanding while I took a break. It means a lot to me." Jess gave her a supportive nod. "We're all in this together, Emma. No need to apologize." Harper, who was also present, smiled at her. "I'm glad to see you back at full strength. We've got a lot to tackle today, but I'm confident that with your leadership, we're going to pull off something really special." Emma took a deep breath. She felt ready to jump back in, but she also knew the importance of pacing herself. She wasn't going to try to control everything anymore. She had a team that was capable of stepping up, and together, they could make this campaign the success it needed to be. They began to discuss their progress on the mental health awareness campaign. The content was coming together well, and Emma could see the energy in the room shifting. There was a sense of collective purpose now. Everyone was invested, and everyone was contributing. It wasn't just her carrying the weight anymore. As the campaign gained momentum, Emma began to see the fruits of her efforts. The team grew stronger, the content more engaging, and the message began to resonate with the student body. She found herself stepping into a more collaborative role, offering guidance but also trusting others to take the reins. One afternoon, as they reviewed the final promotional materials, Jess turned to Emma with a grin. "You know, I think we're actually doing it. We're really pulling this off." Emma smiled, a feeling of accomplishment washing over her. "Yeah, we are." It was a moment of clarity for Emma. She had learned a vital lesson. Leadership wasn't about doing everything yourself. It was about lifting others up, guiding them, and trusting them to take ownership of their roles. It was about knowing when to step back and let others shine. And for the first time in a long while, Emma felt like she was leading in the way she was meant to. Not alone, not in isolation, but as part of a team. That evening, as Emma sat down to check her emails, she received a message from her parents. "Hey, we were thinking of you today. Can you come home this weekend? We miss you." Emma smiled and immediately began typing a response. "I would love to. I'm going to make it happen. Can't wait to see you both." For the first time in a long while, Emma felt at peace with the decision she had made to slow down, to prioritize what truly mattered, and to ask for help when she needed it. She was no longer just pushing herself to be the best. She was learning how to balance her ambitions with self-care. And in doing so, she had found a sense of peace she hadn't known in a long time. The following week, Emma took a much-needed trip back home for the weekend. As she walked through the front door of her family's house, she was greeted by the familiar warmth of her mom's cooking and the sight of her dad reading the newspaper in the living room. "Emma," her mom exclaimed as she rushed over to hug her. "We've missed you so much." "I missed you too, Mom," Emma said, feeling the tension in her body begin to melt away. Her dad stood up and gave her a hearty hug, then gave her a playful shove. "Look at you, all grown up. How's the big leadership thing going? Still running yourself ragged?" Emma laughed softly, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "I had a bit of a breakdown, actually. But I'm better now. Just needed to slow down and take a step back." Her mom raised an eyebrow but didn't push further. "Well, we're glad you're here. Dinner's almost ready. Come, help me set the table." As she worked alongside her mom, setting the table and chopping vegetables, Emma felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in a long time. There was no agenda here, no deadlines, no meetings, just the comforting routine of home. Later, as they sat around the dinner table, her parents told her about the new neighbors who had moved in next door and how they had adopted a golden retriever puppy. Her dad joked about his failed attempts to teach the dog to fetch, and her mom shared a new recipe she had tried for the first time. For the first time in weeks, Emma didn't feel the weight of responsibility. She was simply Emma, the daughter, unburdened and present in the moment. That evening, after dinner, Emma sat in the living room with her dad, flipping through old photo albums. They laughed at old pictures from her childhood, moments frozen in time that had once seemed so small but now felt so significant. Her dad pointed to a picture of Emma at her 8th birthday party, where she was surrounded by friends, laughing and holding a colorful cake. "You were always the life of the party," he said, his voice tinged with nostalgia. "But you've changed a lot since then. You've become so focused, so driven. I'm proud of you, but don't forget to enjoy the little things too." Emma smiled softly, looking at the picture of herself from years ago. She had been carefree back then, unburdened by expectations or the pressures of trying to be perfect. When did that change? She wondered. She had always thought that being driven and focused was the path to success, but now she wasn't so sure. Maybe there was something more to life than just achievements. Maybe there was something to be found in enjoying the moments, the relationships, the simple things that made life beautiful. The next morning, Emma went for a walk with her mom in the nearby park. The air was crisp and fresh, and the sunlight filtered through the trees, casting long shadows across the path. As they walked, they talked about everything and nothing, about Emma's childhood friends, her dreams for the future, and her growing concern about how much of her life she had sacrificed in the pursuit of success. "You've always been so focused on doing things perfectly," her mom said, pausing for a moment to take in the view of a nearby lake. "But what's most important is that you're happy. Success is wonderful, but it shouldn't come at the expense of your peace of mind." Emma felt a lump form in her throat. Her mom's words hit her harder than she expected. She had been so focused on proving herself, on living up to everyone's expectations, that she had forgotten to ask herself what she really wanted. "Mom, I don't know if I'm doing the right thing anymore," Emma confessed, the weight of her own thoughts finally breaking free. "I don't know if I'm on the right path, or if I've just been chasing something that doesn't even matter." Her mom stopped walking and turned to face her, a soft smile playing on her lips. "Sweetheart, you're still figuring it out. And that's okay. You don't have to have it all figured out today. Life is a journey, and sometimes you have to take a step back to see things more clearly." Emma took a deep breath, feeling the truth of her mom's words sink in. She wasn't alone in her uncertainty. Everyone, even her mom, had their moments of doubt and indecision. It was okay not to have all the answers. It was okay to take things one step at a time. By the time Emma returned to school on Monday, she felt a renewed sense of clarity. Her time away had allowed her to reconnect with herself, and she was determined to bring that sense of balance back with her. She no longer felt the need to be perfect or to carry the weight of everything on her own shoulders. In the days that followed, Emma took a more measured approach to her work. She still dedicated herself to the mental health campaign, but now she allowed her team to share more of the load. She delegated tasks, trusting her peers to take ownership of their roles, and in doing so, she was able to give them the opportunity to grow as well. Jess, in particular, stepped up in ways Emma hadn't anticipated. She took on more responsibility in coordinating the campaign's social media strategy, and her creativity shone through. Emma couldn't help but feel proud of how her team was growing, how they were becoming more than just a group of students working toward a common goal. They were becoming a community. One afternoon, as Emma and Jess worked on finalizing a presentation for the campaign launch, Jess turned to her and smiled. "I have to say, Emma, you've really found your rhythm. You're a different person now. You're not as stressed out, not as rigid. It's like you're, I don't know, free." Emma smiled back, feeling a sense of accomplishment wash over her. "I've been learning a lot lately. Sometimes you have to let go of control to really feel in control." Jess raised an eyebrow. "I'm impressed. I think you've finally figured out that you don't have to do everything yourself. You just needed to trust us a little more." Emma laughed. "Yeah, I guess I did. But it's a good thing I have you all to lean on." And for the first time in a long time, Emma realized just how true that was. She didn't have to carry everything on her own. Her team, her friends, and her family, they were all there to support her. She just had to learn to lean on them when she needed to. As the mental health awareness campaign approached its launch, Emma stood at the front of the room during the final meeting, looking out at the group of students who had worked so hard alongside her. They had come together as a team, supporting one another, and now they were ready to present their work to the school. "We did this together," Emma said, her voice steady but full of gratitude. "And no matter what happens, I'm proud of all of us. We've created something that will make a difference. But more importantly, we've created something together. And that's what matters." The team cheered, a sense of accomplishment filling the room. Emma felt the weight of the past few months finally lift off her shoulders. She had learned that leadership wasn't just about being in control, it was about trusting others, about knowing when to step back, and about prioritizing what truly mattered. As the campaign launch day approached, Emma knew that this was just the beginning. She had a long way to go and many more lessons to learn. But for now, she felt at peace, knowing she was no longer running on empty. She was leading, yes, but she was also living. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The morning of the campaign launch arrived with a mixture of excitement and nervousness that Emma could feel in her bones. As the clock ticked closer to 8 a.m., Emma stood before the mirror in her dorm room, adjusting her blazer and making sure her hair was in place. But there was something different about her this morning. She wasn't focused on making everything perfect. Instead, she was focused on the message, the purpose, behind the event she had spent so much time and energy on. It's not about me, she reminded herself. It's about the message. She took a deep breath and checked her phone. A text from Harper popped up on the screen. Good luck today, Emma. You've got this. Just remember, it's not about being perfect, it's about being real. The rest will follow. Emma smiled, grateful for his unwavering support. She had learned so much from him over the past few weeks, especially about authenticity and vulnerability in leadership. Harper had helped her realize that she didn't have to have all the answers or know exactly how everything would play out. She just had to show up, be herself, and lead with purpose. The campaign launch was held in the school's auditorium, and as Emma walked in, she was greeted with an overwhelming sense of pride. The room was filled with banners, informational tables, and digital screens displaying the mental health resources that the team had worked so hard to put together. The energy in the room was electric, and for the first time in a long time, Emma felt like she was exactly where she needed to be. Her team had done an incredible job, and Emma was able to step back, trusting them to handle the final details. Jess was running the social media coverage, while Harper had worked with the school's administration to ensure that the campaign would reach every corner of the student body. Emma had spent the past few weeks learning how to delegate and trust her team more, and now she could see the fruits of that labor. As the event kicked off, Emma found herself in the back of the auditorium, observing the students engaging with the resources. It was a humbling experience to watch, seeing all the hard work come to life in the form of student conversations about mental health, support systems, and breaking down the stigma. Halfway through the event, as Emma was speaking with a group of students, she noticed a familiar face standing at the back of the room. Her heart skipped a beat when she recognized who it was. Mr. Harris, the principal. He was watching her from a distance, and as their eyes met, he gave her a small, encouraging nod. Without thinking, Emma excused herself from the group and made her way over to him. She hadn't had much interaction with the principal since that fateful day when he knocked on her window, but seeing him now, she couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude. He had been one of the first people to believe in her when she doubted herself. Mr. Harris, Emma said, approaching him with a smile. I didn't expect to see you here. He chuckled softly. You didn't think I'd miss the launch of a campaign that could change the culture of the school, did you? I've been following your progress, Emma. I have to say, I'm impressed. Emma felt a warmth spread through her chest at his words. Thank you, Mr. Harris. That means a lot. They stood together in silence for a moment, watching the students engaged in conversations with the mental health booths. You've really done something special here, Mr. Harris said after a pause. But it's not just about the campaign itself. It's about you, Emma. You've taken something so personal, something that so many people struggle with, and you've turned it into a platform for change. That takes courage. Emma felt a lump form in her throat. Courage. She hadn't thought of it that way. All she had done was try to make a difference, but now, hearing Mr. Harris's words, she realized how much courage it had taken to open up about her own struggles and to lead others in doing the same. Thank you, Emma said, her voice quieter now. I think I've finally realized that it's okay to ask for help, to not have it all together. That's the whole point of this campaign, isn't it? To show people that it's okay to not be okay. Mr. Harris gave her a thoughtful look. Exactly. And that's what makes you a great leader, Emma. Not because you've figured it all out, but because you're willing to be vulnerable. You're willing to admit that you don't have all the answers, and that's what makes people trust you. After the event wrapped up, Emma felt a sense of fulfillment she hadn't experienced before. She had helped create something that had the potential to change lives. Something that could make a real difference in how students approached mental health. And she had done it with the help of her team, with the guidance of people like Harper, Jess, and even Mr. Harris. That evening, as she walked back to her dorm, Emma took a moment to reflect on how far she had come. It felt like a lifetime ago when she was sitting alone in her room, unsure of herself, feeling like she had to carry the weight of the world on her shoulders. But now everything had shifted. She no longer felt that burden. She had found a way to balance her ambitions with self-care. She had learned to trust others, to ask for help, and to lead with authenticity. As Emma entered her dorm room and set down her things, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Harper. "You did it, Emma. You were amazing today. I'm proud of you." She smiled and quickly typed a response. "Thank you, Harper. I couldn't have done it without you and the whole team. I'm finally starting to understand what it really means to lead." She paused before hitting send, thinking about the journey she had been on. Leadership wasn't just about being in control, it was about being real, about lifting others up, and about knowing when to take a step back. As she hit send, Emma felt a deep sense of gratitude for the lessons she had learned and the people who had helped her along the way. This wasn't the end of her journey, it was just the beginning. The weeks following the successful campaign launch were a whirlwind for Emma. Between classes, the ongoing mental health campaign, and her personal reflections, she had never been busier. However, the pace, though overwhelming at times, also felt empowering. Emma had made a real impact on her peers, and for the first time in her life, she felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. She had found her place as a leader, but there was a lingering uncertainty that she couldn't shake off. Despite the success of the campaign, Emma had noticed a change in Jess. Her normally bubbly and energetic friend had become withdrawn, often leaving meetings early and showing up late. Emma had assumed Jess was just overwhelmed with the workload. After all, they were all juggling a lot, but something about Jess's behavior made Emma uneasy. One afternoon, as Emma was working on her assignment in the library, Jess approached her. She looked pale, her eyes shadowed with exhaustion. "Hey, got a minute?" Jess asked softly, pulling up a chair beside her. Of course, Emma replied, sensing something was off. "Is everything okay? You've seemed a little off lately." Jess hesitated for a moment, biting her lip, before finally meeting Emma's eyes. I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you sooner." Emma's heart skipped a beat. She had no idea what Jess was about to say, but she could feel the weight in her voice. "What is it, Jess?" Emma asked, her voice gentle. "You can tell me anything." Jess inhaled deeply before exhaling slowly, trying to gather her thoughts. "I didn't tell you this before, but when I joined the mental health campaign, I was already struggling with my own mental health issues. I've been dealing with depression and anxiety for a while now, and I didn't know how to handle everything. I didn't know how to open up about it." Emma's eyes widened, shock running through her. She never would have guessed. Jess had always been the life of the party, the one who kept the group laughing. To hear her say this was nothing short of jarring. "Jess, why didn't you tell me?" Emma asked, her voice laced with concern. "You're not alone in this. We could have helped you." Jess shook her head, her expression pained. "I was afraid. I didn't want to be a burden, especially with everything we've been working on for the campaign. I didn't want to disappoint you or anyone else. I thought if I could just push through, I'd be okay. But I was wrong." Emma's heart went out to Jess. She couldn't imagine how difficult it must have been to hold that in while also trying to keep up the facade of someone who had it all together. "You don't ever have to hide anything from me, Jess," Emma said firmly. "I'm here for you always. You're part of this team, and that means we're in this together. No one gets left behind." Jess's eyes filled with tears, and Emma felt her own heart break at the vulnerability in her friend's voice. "I just didn't know how to ask for help," Jess whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I thought I could do it all on my own." Emma reached out and placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to do it alone. We've all been there in one way or another. And you don't have to carry the weight of this campaign or anything else by yourself." For the next hour, the two friends sat together in silence, letting the weight of the conversation sink in. Emma knew this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of something deeper, something that would take time to heal. Over the following days, Emma made sure to check in on Jess regularly. She reached out to their school's counseling services, encouraging Jess to seek help. She also made it clear that Jess was not a burden to her or the team. In fact, the mental health campaign had become an even more important project for Emma, as she realized just how many people like Jess were struggling in silence. That Friday, after a particularly long day of classes, Emma met up with Harper at their favorite coffee shop. The warm, comforting atmosphere of the cafe provided Emma with a sense of calm she didn't realize she needed. As they sat down with their drinks, Emma couldn't help but share what had happened with Jess. "Harper, I'm honestly a little shocked," Emma began, stirring her coffee absent-mindedly. "I had no idea Jess had been struggling like that. She always seems so confident, so put together. But it makes me realize just how many people are hiding things behind the scenes." Harper nodded, his expression serious. "It's something that a lot of people deal with, but no one ever talks about it. It's not just about the campaign, it's about real, genuine support. Sometimes it takes a friend to show up and listen." Emma sighed, looking out the window at the busy street outside. "I don't know how I missed it. I should have seen the signs, you know." "Don't be too hard on yourself," Harper said gently. "You've been going through your own journey, Emma. You've been learning to trust others, to ask for help. It's not about being perfect. It's about being human. And right now, you're doing the best you can." Jess knows you're there for her, and that's what matters most. Emma smiled, feeling a sense of relief wash over her. It was true. She wasn't perfect, but she was trying her best to be a good friend, a good leader. And sometimes, that was enough. "I just want to make sure no one feels like they have to go through this alone," Emma said, her voice filled with determination. "That's why this campaign is so important. It's not just about raising awareness. It's about creating a space where people can speak up without fear of judgment." Harper's eyes softened, and he placed a hand on hers. "You're doing that, Emma. You're already doing it." The next day, as Emma and Jess met up to go over some final preparations for the campaign's outreach efforts, Emma felt a deep sense of gratitude for the friendship they shared. Jess seemed to be doing better, her energy slowly returning, and she was now more open about seeking professional help. "I'm glad you reached out to me, Jess," Emma said, her voice steady and warm. "I'm here for you, and I always will be." Jess smiled, her eyes brighter than they had been in days. "Thank you, Em. I don't know what I would have done without you. You've really changed my perspective on a lot of things." Emma gave a small, understanding nod. "We're in this together. And we'll get through it together." As the campaign continued to grow, Emma felt more connected to her team and her mission than ever before. The bond they shared, one built on mutual support, trust, and understanding, was the foundation for everything they were creating. Emma no longer felt the need to do everything alone. She knew that true leadership wasn't about carrying the weight of the world. It was about lifting others up and sharing that burden. But little did she know, another challenge was about to emerge, one that would force Emma to question everything she thought she knew about herself and her future. As the days went by, Emma had settled into a routine. The mental health campaign was continuing to grow, more students were attending the workshops and participating in the discussions, and Jess was taking the necessary steps to prioritize her own mental well-being. Emma felt like, finally, the pieces of her life were falling into place. But life, as she had learned, had a way of throwing curveballs when you least expected them. It started innocently enough. A message from Harper popped up on her phone one Tuesday morning as she was making coffee. "Hey, can you meet me in the student lounge in 30 minutes? I need to talk." Emma had known Harper long enough to recognize the tone in his text. Something was wrong. As Emma walked into the student lounge, she spotted Harper sitting at a corner table, his face shadowed with concern. She immediately walked over and sat down across from him. "Hey, what's going on?" Emma asked, trying to keep her voice light. But the tension in Harper's eyes told her this wasn't just a casual chat. Harper hesitated for a moment, his fingers tapping on the table. "I've been thinking a lot about the campaign, Emma, about everything you've been doing, and I think it's time for me to step back." Emma blinked, confused. "Step back? What do you mean? You're one of the main people driving this thing. We need you." Harper shook his head, looking down at his hands. "I don't think I can keep going, Em. I've been feeling overwhelmed more than I want to admit, and I don't know if I can keep up with everything. I've been trying to juggle too many things, and I'm just burned out." The words hit Emma like a punch to the gut. Harper, her friend, her constant support, was struggling. She had always seen him as the strong one, the reliable one. The thought of him stepping back from the campaign, especially after everything they had worked for, was a blow she wasn't prepared for. I didn't know you were feeling like this," Emma whispered, her voice faltering. She leaned forward, her hands gripping the edge of the table. "Harper, we're in this together. You can't just walk away. Not now." Harper's eyes softened, but his expression was firm. "It's not about walking away, Emma. It's about taking care of myself. I've been pushing myself too hard for too long, and I've been ignoring my own needs. And the truth is, I can't keep pretending that I'm okay." Emma's heart ached as she saw the vulnerability in his eyes. She had been so focused on the campaign, on her own struggles, that she hadn't realized Harper had been quietly fighting his own battle. "Harper," Emma said softly, "I didn't know. But I understand. If you need time, I'll support you. We all will. You've been there for me when I needed you most. It's my turn to be there for you now." Harper gave her a small, grateful smile. "I'm not giving up on the campaign, Em. I'm just stepping back for a bit. I'll still help out when I can, but I need some time to figure things out, you know." Emma nodded, her throat tight. "Of course. I'll make sure everything keeps going. But please, don't feel like you have to do everything alone. We're a team. We're in this together." The conversation with Harper left Emma shaken, but it also made her realize just how fragile the balance she had created truly was. She had been so focused on making the campaign a success, on ensuring that she was doing everything perfectly, that she hadn't seen how much of her own support system was quietly crumbling. That night, as Emma lay in bed, her mind raced. She had always believed that leadership meant pushing forward, keeping your eyes on the goal, and never letting anything slow you down. But now, as she thought about Harper and Jess, she began to question that belief. Was leadership about strength and control? Or was it about vulnerability and knowing when to ask for help? The next few days were a blur. Emma kept up the campaign with a relentless pace, but it felt like something inside her was slipping. She found herself going through the motions, organizing events and answering emails, but every time she paused for a breath, a deep sense of exhaustion washed over her. It wasn't just physical fatigue, it was mental and emotional. One afternoon, Emma found herself sitting alone in the quiet student lounge, staring out the window at the gray sky. The weight of the world seemed to be pressing down on her, and for the first time since starting the campaign, she felt completely alone. It wasn't until she heard the soft shuffle of footsteps behind her that she snapped out of her reverie. Turning around, she was surprised to see Jess standing in the doorway, her face full of concern. "Emma?" Jess asked hesitantly. "Are you okay?" Emma blinked, not realizing how much of her exhaustion must have shown on her face. She had been so caught up in trying to keep everything together that she hadn't even realized how much she was struggling. "I don't know, Jess," Emma said quietly. I think I'm burned out. I've been pushing so hard, trying to do everything right, and now it feels like everything's falling apart. I'm scared I'm going to let everyone down." Jess walked over and sat down beside Emma, offering a quiet presence that Emma hadn't known she needed until now. "You're not alone in this, Emma," Jess said softly. "We're all in this together. If you need to take a step back, we'll figure it out. You've given so much to this campaign already. You deserve to take care of yourself too." Emma felt her breath catch in her throat. In that moment, she realized that she had been so focused on helping others that she had forgotten to help herself. She had been so afraid of being seen as weak or incapable that she hadn't allowed herself to acknowledge her own limits. "I've been so scared to admit that I'm struggling," Emma said, her voice trembling. "I thought if I did, everything would fall apart." Jess smiled gently. "You don't have to be perfect, Em. No one is. And we all need help sometimes. You're not weak for asking for it." For the first time in weeks, Emma felt the weight on her shoulders begin to lift. Jess's words were a reminder that leadership wasn't about having all the answers or always being strong. It was about being human. About showing up, being honest, and trusting those around you to help when you need it. By the end of the week, Emma had made a decision. She would take a break, just for a few days, to recharge. She wasn't abandoning the campaign, but she knew that she couldn't keep pushing herself this way without risking her own well-being. With Jess and Harper's support, Emma knew she would be able to regain her balance. But more importantly, she now understood that strength came not from perfection, but from vulnerability and the courage to lean on others when you needed to. As she stepped back from the chaos of the campaign for a brief moment of rest, Emma couldn't help but wonder, what other lessons would she learn on this journey of self-discovery? And what kind of leader would she become when she finally embraced the full spectrum of her humanity? The days that followed Emma's decision to take a break were filled with a surprising sense of peace. It wasn't that she had stopped caring about the campaign or the people she was trying to help. It was simply that, for the first time in a long while, she was allowing herself to breathe. She spent the first few days off from her usual responsibilities in a quiet but meaningful way, taking walks in the park, reading books she'd meant to finish months ago, and even sitting still without the constant pull of deadlines and to-do lists. It was an unfamiliar, yet welcome, luxury. The quietness of her routine was almost meditative. She could feel the tension in her shoulders begin to melt, and the sharpness of her emotions dulled, like the soft edge of a blade being slowly honed. Emma hadn't realized how much stress had been consuming her until it started to recede. But the sense of relief wasn't complete. There was a gnawing, subtle feeling that tugged at her even during the rare moments of calm. She still felt guilty, still unsure whether she had made the right decision. Could the campaign succeed without her? What if everything crumbled now that she wasn't leading it? On the fourth day of her self-imposed break, Emma found herself sitting at the small coffee shop near campus, her journal open in front of her. She hadn't written in it for weeks, but today, she felt the urge to put her thoughts down. After all, she had so many questions swirling in her head, and writing had always been a way to make sense of the chaos. "What is a leader supposed to do when they've lost their way?" she wrote, her pen moving hesitantly across the page. "I've tried so hard to make everything perfect, to lead with strength, with control. But what if that isn't the answer? What if real leadership is about knowing when to step aside, to trust others, to be vulnerable?" Emma stopped writing, tapping the pen against the journal. She wasn't sure why she felt the need to reflect so deeply now, but a part of her knew that this time of rest wasn't just a break, it was a necessary moment of introspection. She wasn't just stepping back from the campaign, she was stepping back from the version of herself that she thought she had to be. The door chimed as it opened, and Emma glanced up to see Jess walking in. Her face was lighter than it had been a week ago. There was a softness to her expression, an ease Emma hadn't noticed before. "Hey, Jess said as she slid into the chair across from her. "How are you doing?" Emma smiled, grateful to see her friend doing better. "Honestly, I'm doing okay. It's been weird, good, but weird. I never realized how much I needed to step away." Jess nodded, understanding. It's like when you're so caught up in the storm that you don't realize how much it's tearing you apart until you're able to breathe again. "That's exactly it," Emma said, her voice thoughtful. "I've been running on empty for so long, I didn't know how drained I was. And now that I'm not running at full speed, I can see everything more clearly." She paused, her gaze drifting out the window. "I guess I've been so afraid of slowing down because I thought it would mean I'm weak or that I'm failing. But now I'm not so sure that's true." Jess smiled, her eyes gentle. "You know, I think you're onto something. We always think we have to be on all the time, that we have to prove ourselves. But maybe it's okay to rest. Maybe we all need to take a step back sometimes to find our balance." Emma let Jess's words sink in. It was the first time anyone had really said something like that to her. Jess had always been so open, but now, as she sat across from Emma, Emma saw that her friend was the one who had grown too. Jess had learned to ask for help, to lean into the support of others, just as Emma was learning now. "I think I'm starting to understand that," Emma said, her voice tinged with realization. "Leadership isn't just about showing up and taking charge all the time. Sometimes it's about knowing when to let others take the lead or knowing when you need to focus on yourself." Jess nodded. "Exactly. It's about trust, trusting the people around you, and trusting yourself to know what you need." Later that evening, after leaving the coffee shop, Emma decided to take a walk through the campus. She strolled slowly, her mind moving in a steady rhythm, much like her steps. She was beginning to realize that her break wasn't just a chance to rest, it was an opportunity for growth. The pressure she had placed on herself, the expectations she had set, were all self-imposed. There was no perfect way to lead. Leadership wasn't about always being strong, always being the one with the answer. It was about connection, about recognizing that strength also lay in vulnerability and asking for support when needed. As she walked, she realized she had learned something important during these past weeks, something that had been there all along, but she hadn't fully seen. People didn't need her to be perfect. They didn't need her to have all the answers. What they needed was her presence, her authenticity, and her willingness to show up, even when she was struggling. And maybe that was the greatest lesson of all. By the time Emma returned to her apartment that evening, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Harper. She hadn't heard from him in days. "Hey, I've been thinking. I want to help again. I can't just sit on the sidelines. Let's talk when you're ready." A warm feeling spread through Emma as she read the message. Harper was reaching out, not out of obligation, but because he wanted to be part of something important. He didn't need to be perfect either, he just needed to show up. Emma smiled, her heart feeling fuller than it had in weeks. Maybe the campaign could thrive without her constant leadership, after all. Maybe the team could carry it forward together. The next day, Emma called a team meeting, asking everyone to gather at the campus library. Jess, Harper, and the others arrived promptly. As they sat down, Emma felt a sense of camaraderie she hadn't realized had grown over the past months. They had become a true team, one that wasn't just about one person pushing forward but about everyone working together, understanding each other's strengths and weaknesses, and supporting one another. "I've been thinking a lot lately," Emma began, looking around at the familiar faces. "And I realized something important. Leadership doesn't mean doing everything yourself. It doesn't mean being perfect. It's about being real. It's about knowing when you need help and when it's time to let others step up. I've taken some time to reflect, and I'm ready to be here, to lead in a way that's about all of us, not just me." Harper smiled, nodding in agreement. I've been thinking the same thing. We're a team, Em. We always have been. And I'm ready to jump back in, to help out however I can. Jess reached across the table, giving Emma's hand a squeeze. We've all got each other's backs. That's what matters most. Emma felt a rush of gratitude toward her team. She had learned more from them than she could have imagined. They had all taught her the importance of community, of leaning on each other, and most importantly, of being human together. As the meeting continued, Emma felt a new sense of clarity. She had been afraid that taking a step back meant she wasn't strong enough, but in reality, it had only made her stronger. She had learned the value of trust, of balance, and of being able to admit when she didn't have all the answers. And as they discussed the next steps for the campaign, Emma knew that the road ahead wouldn't be without challenges. But for the first time in a long while, she felt ready for whatever came next. Because, in the end, leadership wasn't about being alone at the top. It was about being together, even when things weren't perfect, even when things got tough. And together, they would make it through. The morning sun filtered through the large windows of the campus library as Emma sat at a long table surrounded by her team. The weight of the previous few weeks, the exhaustion, the self-doubt, the guilt had begun to lift, but there was still a lingering sense of uncertainty. Even with her newfound clarity, Emma knew that the road ahead wasn't going to be easy. The world wasn't going to slow down just because she had taken a step back. If anything, things seemed to be moving faster than ever. But as she looked around at the faces of her team, Harper, Jess, and the others, she realized something. This wasn't just her responsibility anymore. They were all in this together. "All right," Emma said, standing up to address everyone. "I'm back, but this time, I'm not going to do everything myself. We've built something here that's bigger than any one of us. It's a team effort, and I want to make sure we're all moving forward together in the right direction." Harper, sitting across from her, gave a small nod of agreement. "We've all got each other's backs. Let's make sure we're all contributing in a way that works for each of us." Jess smiled, adding, "Exactly. It's about balance. We each have different strengths, and we should use them to support the campaign and each other." Emma couldn't help but feel a sense of warmth spread through her. She hadn't realized how much she had been craving this sense of unity. The idea that they were all working together, not just as a group of individuals, but as a team, was something that made her feel more confident than ever. They had built a foundation on trust and vulnerability, and now it was time to rebuild the campaign from the ground up. The meeting continued with everyone sharing ideas on how to refresh the campaign and make it more inclusive. There were discussions about expanding the mental health resources, offering workshops on stress management, and even collaborating with other student organizations to reach a wider audience. They were no longer just focused on one part of the problem. They were tackling it from all angles, coming together to create something that would truly benefit the entire school community. As the meeting progressed, Emma realized how much her perspective had shifted. She had gone from feeling like she had to carry the weight of everything on her shoulders to understanding that the weight didn't have to fall on one person alone. They all had their roles to play, and together, they could accomplish something greater than any one individual could. Later that afternoon, after the meeting had ended and everyone had scattered to work on their respective tasks, Emma found herself walking through the campus, her mind buzzing with the plans they had put in motion. She had always loved the feeling of a fresh start, and that was exactly what this felt like: a new beginning, a new direction. But as she walked, a small part of her still wondered if she was making the right choices. Was it really okay to step back? Could she truly lead without taking charge of every single detail? The doubt crept back in, quietly, like an old habit. Just as she was about to lose herself in those thoughts, her phone buzzed with a message from Harper. "Hey, I was thinking, we should do something fun, something that's not about the campaign for once. What do you say?" Emma smiled, grateful for the suggestion. She needed a break, something to remind her that life wasn't always about work, about proving herself. Maybe it was time to remember what it felt like to just be. The next afternoon, Emma and Harper met up for a casual hangout at the local park. It was a welcome change of pace, no campaign meetings, no heavy conversations about mental health. Just two friends, enjoying a rare moment of freedom. As they sat on the grass, watching the kids run around with frisbees and dogs chase after tennis balls, Harper spoke up. "I know things have been crazy lately, but I'm really proud of you, Em. You've done more for the school than anyone could have ever expected. And the fact that you're learning to step back, to lean on us, that takes real strength." Emma chuckled, glancing at her friend. "I think I've learned that strength doesn't always look like I thought it did. It's not about always being the one in control or the one who's always pushing forward. It's about knowing when you need to pause, to listen, and to let others take the reins for a while." Harper nodded, taking a deep breath. "You're right. It's not about always doing more, it's about doing what matters, and doing it together." The simplicity of their conversation made Emma realize something important. She had been so caught up in trying to prove herself as a leader that she had forgotten what it meant to truly lead. Leading wasn't about having all the answers or being the loudest voice in the room. It was about listening, collaborating, and lifting others up along the way. Emma didn't have to carry everything alone. In fact, it was better that way. As the weeks went by, Emma's role in the campaign became more balanced. She was still heavily involved, but her approach had shifted. She spent more time listening to her team's ideas, offering guidance when needed, and stepping back when others needed to take charge. There was a newfound trust within the group, a sense that no one was in this alone. The changes were subtle but meaningful. The workshops became more interactive, with guest speakers and activities that helped students feel more comfortable discussing their mental health. The social media campaigns became more personal, featuring stories from students who had faced struggles and overcome them. Emma began to see the impact of what they were building, not just on the school, but on herself as well. One evening, as she stood in the student center, watching a group of students gather for one of the workshops, she felt a rush of gratitude. The work was never easy, and there would always be challenges ahead. But as she looked around, Emma knew that she was no longer carrying the burden alone. They were all in this together, working side by side to create something bigger than any of them could have imagined. That night, Emma sat down to write in her journal again. Her thoughts were clearer now, and as she reflected on everything that had happened, she realized how much she had grown. Leadership isn't about being perfect. It's about being human. It's about knowing when to ask for help and when to offer it. It's about building something that lasts, something bigger than yourself. I've learned that it's not about being strong all the time. It's about knowing when to lean on others and when to step aside so they can lead. Together, we are stronger. Together, we will make a difference. As she closed her journal and set it aside, Emma felt a sense of peace. The journey wasn't over, but she had finally learned what it meant to lead, not with power or control, but with heart and humility. And that, she realized, was exactly the kind of leadership the world needed. The sense of camaraderie Emma had built with her team felt stronger than ever. The campaign was gaining traction, and students were beginning to talk about it more openly. Emma felt confident that their hard work was starting to make a difference, and for the first time in months, she allowed herself to feel proud of what they had accomplished. But as often happens with moments of progress, something unexpected came along to challenge it. It was a Thursday morning when Emma received an email that would set everything into motion. The subject line was simple, urgent: campaign funding cut. Her heart sank as she opened the email and read through the details. The university administration had decided to cut the funding for their mental health campaign, citing budget constraints and a reallocation of funds to other areas. It was a blow that came out of nowhere, and for a moment, Emma found herself staring at the screen in disbelief. This wasn't just a minor setback. This was a critical turning point. Without the necessary funding, many of the upcoming workshops, events, and social media outreach initiatives would have to be canceled. The momentum they had built would come to a screeching halt. Emma's first reaction was anger. She wanted to storm into the administration's office, demand an explanation, and fight for what they had worked so hard to create. But the anger quickly turned to fear. What would they do now? How would they continue without the resources they had relied on? Her thoughts raced as she picked up the phone and called Jess. "Hey, Jess," Emma said, trying to keep her voice steady. "We have a problem." The next hour was a whirlwind of phone calls, emails, and meetings with the team. Everyone was understandably upset. Harper was the first to speak up, his voice calm but determined. "We can't let this stop us. We've come too far." "I agree," Jess added, her voice full of resolve. "But we need to come up with a plan. Fast. If we don't have the funding, we need to figure out other ways to keep this campaign alive." Emma took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. The old Emma might have spiraled into panic, but the new Emma knew that the best thing she could do was stay calm and think strategically. "Okay," she said. "Let's start by brainstorming. We need to find other ways to raise money, to keep things moving. We're not giving up, no matter what." They spent the rest of the day in intense discussions, coming up with a plan to salvage the campaign. They would reach out to local businesses for sponsorships, launch a crowdfunding campaign, and organize a fundraising event. It wasn't going to be easy, and it would require a lot of work, but Emma was determined. As they worked through the logistics, Emma realized something important. This setback wasn't just an obstacle. It was an opportunity. An opportunity to prove that they were more than just a campaign dependent on funding. They were a movement, a community, and they could find a way to survive and thrive even when the odds were against them. But the pressure was still heavy. They didn't have the luxury of time, and the clock was ticking. If they didn't find a solution quickly, they would lose everything they had worked for. The following week, Emma found herself standing in front of a crowded auditorium. She was speaking at a community event, trying to rally support for their campaign. The university's decision to cut funding was now public, and Emma had been asked to address the crowd, explaining the situation and asking for their help. Her heart raced as she looked out at the sea of faces in the audience. She wasn't sure if they would understand, or if they would even care. After all, the university's budget cuts were just one more piece of the puzzle in a much larger system. Would anyone really listen? But as Emma began to speak, something shifted. The audience was quiet, attentive. She spoke honestly, explaining the importance of the campaign, the people they had helped, and the challenges they were now facing. She didn't sugarcoat anything. She told them that they were in danger of losing everything, but that they were willing to fight for it if the community would stand with them. "I know that times are tough," Emma said, her voice steady despite the nerves bubbling up inside her. "But this campaign isn't just about us. It's about all of us. It's about making sure that every single person on this campus has the resources they need to thrive, not just survive. We need your support now more than ever. Together, we can make sure this doesn't end here." The room fell silent for a moment, and then, to Emma's surprise, the audience erupted into applause. The clapping wasn't just polite, it was full of emotion, full of solidarity. Emma felt a wave of relief wash over her as she realized that they weren't alone in this fight. Over the next few days, the team worked tirelessly. Jess and Harper took charge of the crowdfunding campaign, reaching out to alumni and local businesses for donations. Emma organized a series of fundraising events, including a student-run talent show and a charity run, both of which drew large crowds and raised significant funds. Though the stress was immense, Emma felt a renewed sense of purpose. They weren't just fighting to keep their campaign alive, they were fighting for something bigger. They were fighting for the students who had come to rely on the resources they provided. They were fighting for a cause they all believed in. One evening, after a particularly long day of organizing, Emma sat down at her desk, exhausted but filled with a quiet pride. The fundraising efforts had been successful, more so than she could have imagined. They had raised enough money to keep the campaign going, and with the community support, they were able to continue offering workshops, providing mental health resources, and organizing events. As Emma sat there, the weight of everything they had been through, the setbacks, the frustration, the doubt began to settle. She had learned something incredibly valuable during this process. Leadership wasn't just about guiding others to success. It was about resilience, about adapting when things didn't go as planned, and about finding strength in the face of adversity. Her phone buzzed, breaking her train of thought. It was a text from Jess. "We did it, Em. We're back on track." Emma smiled, feeling the tension of the past few weeks finally begin to ease. They had faced the storm head-on, and they had come through it stronger than ever. The campaign was back on track, and so was Emma. She had learned that setbacks weren't the end of the road, they were just a part of the journey. And as long as she had her team by her side, there was nothing they couldn't overcome. The days following the funding crisis were a blur of late nights and early mornings, but the team had pulled through. Emma felt an incredible sense of relief, but also a deeper understanding of herself. The setbacks had not only tested their resolve, but also transformed the way she saw leadership. It wasn't just about managing a project, it was about the perseverance to keep moving forward, no matter what. The success of their fundraising efforts and the renewed sense of purpose gave Emma a sense of hope. The campaign was back on track, and they had even secured some long-term partnerships that would provide stability going forward. But the road ahead was still uncertain. They weren't out of the woods yet, and Emma knew they needed to keep pushing forward if they wanted to make an even bigger impact. It was early one Saturday morning when Emma received a phone call that would test her newfound perspective on leadership once more. The number wasn't familiar, but Emma answered anyway. "Hello, this is Emma," she said, her voice still a little groggy from sleep. "Emma, this is Principal Harris," a voice on the other end of the line responded. "I need to speak with you about something urgent." Emma sat up straighter in bed, suddenly wide awake. Principal Harris rarely called her directly. "What's going on?" "There's been some talk about your campaign," Principal Harris continued. "The administration is starting to get nervous about the direction it's taking. Some of the more traditional members of the board are questioning whether this initiative is still aligned with the university's values. I think you should be prepared for some changes coming your way." Emma's stomach tightened. She had fought so hard to keep the campaign alive after the funding cut, and now this? What kind of changes are we talking about? "I can't go into details yet," Principal Harris replied, "but you should know that the board is meeting next week, and your campaign will be part of the discussion. I suggest you start thinking about your position moving forward. I'll be in touch soon." The phone call ended abruptly, leaving Emma in a haze of confusion and frustration. What did this mean for the future of their campaign? They had already fought so hard to keep it alive. Could it really be in danger again, just when it seemed like they were back on track? The weight of the news hung over Emma all weekend. She couldn't focus on anything else, even as she met up with Harper and Jess to discuss their upcoming events. As they gathered around the table at their favorite cafe, Emma couldn't hold it in anymore. "I just got off the phone with Principal Harris," she said, her voice tight with worry. "The administration is questioning the direction of our campaign. Some people on the board are worried it's not aligned with the university's values." Harper raised an eyebrow. "What does that mean? What do they want us to do?" "I'm not sure," Emma said, rubbing her temples. "But I have a feeling they're going to try to shut us down again. They're meeting next week, and our campaign is going to be part of the discussion." Jess clenched her jaw. "This is ridiculous. We've done nothing but help students. What's their problem with that?" "I don't know," Emma replied, her frustration mounting. "But we can't just sit here and wait for them to make a decision. We need to be proactive. We need to show them that our campaign is more than just a student initiative. It's something that benefits the entire community. We can't let them pull the rug out from under us." The next few days were a whirlwind of preparation. Emma and the team worked tirelessly, organizing their data, gathering testimonials from students who had benefited from the campaign, and planning their presentation for the board meeting. Emma was determined that they wouldn't go down without a fight. But as the day of the meeting approached, a small voice of doubt crept back into her mind. What if it wasn't enough? What if the board decided that their campaign was too much of a risk, or worse, that it didn't align with the university's values? She tried to push the doubts away, reminding herself of everything they had accomplished. The students they had helped, the conversations they had started, the partnerships they had secured. They had built something meaningful, and she couldn't let that be taken away so easily. The morning of the board meeting, Emma stood in front of the mirror, taking a deep breath. She had prepared for this moment. She had practiced her speech, rehearsed her points, and gathered every piece of evidence she could to prove the value of their campaign. But now, standing there in the silence of her dorm room, she realized it wasn't about the words. It was about what she believed in. She believed in the students they were helping. She believed in the cause they were fighting for. And she believed that, even if the odds were against them, they couldn't give up now. With that thought, Emma walked out the door and made her way to the board meeting. The room was full when Emma entered. The board members sat at a long table, their faces serious and unreadable. Principal Harris sat at the head of the table, and she gave Emma a small nod of encouragement as she stepped forward. Emma stood at the front of the room, facing the board. Her palms were sweaty, and her heart pounded in her chest, but she held her head high. She wasn't going to back down. "Good morning, everyone," she began, her voice steady despite the nerves coursing through her. "I'm here today to speak on behalf of our mental health campaign. I know there have been concerns about its direction, but I want to make it clear that this campaign is not just a student initiative. It is a vital part of this university's commitment to the well-being of its students." She continued, explaining the impact of the campaign, sharing stories from students who had found support and community through their initiatives. She highlighted the workshops, the resources, and the partnerships they had developed. And as she spoke, she could see the board members slowly start to soften. They weren't completely convinced, but they were listening. And for Emma, that was a victory in itself. When she finished, she stood there, waiting for the board's response. There was a long silence, and Emma's anxiety spiked. Had she done enough? Finally, one of the board members, a woman with sharp features and a no-nonsense attitude, spoke up. "We understand the importance of this issue, Emma. And while there are still some concerns, I think we can come to a compromise. We'll allow your campaign to continue, but there will need to be certain adjustments to make sure it aligns with the university's broader mission." Emma's heart skipped a beat. She had done it. They had done it. The campaign was safe. As Emma walked out of the meeting, the weight of the world seemed to lift from her shoulders. They had faced yet another challenge, and they had overcome it. She couldn't help but smile as she thought about how far they had come, how much they had grown together as a team. But more than anything, Emma realized that this journey was never going to be about one person or one campaign. It was about the community, the people, and the strength they found in each other when times got tough. And with that, Emma knew they were ready to face whatever came next. Together. The morning after the board meeting, Emma woke up to an unexpected sense of relief. The tension that had plagued her for weeks seemed to melt away, and for the first time in a long while, she felt the weight of the world lift off her shoulders. The board had agreed to allow the campaign to continue, albeit with some adjustments. But more importantly, they had acknowledged the importance of mental health awareness on campus. They had given her team a chance to prove their worth. Still, Emma knew this victory was only part of the journey. There was more work to be done, more challenges to face, and the pressure was still very much there. The weeks that followed were a flurry of activity. The adjustments the university had requested weren't easy to implement. They had to ensure the campaign was integrated more closely with the university's official initiatives, a move that meant even tighter scrutiny from administration. Emma and her team found themselves navigating the delicate balance of maintaining their autonomy while appeasing the powers that be. It wasn't an easy task, but it was a challenge they were willing to face head-on. Despite the added hurdles, the campaign flourished. Attendance at workshops increased, and more students came forward, opening up about their mental health struggles. The resources they provided were having an undeniable impact, and Emma could see the difference they were making, one student at a time. But as the campaign gained more visibility, Emma also began to realize that not everyone was supportive. There were still murmurs of opposition, especially among some faculty members who didn't understand the focus on mental health. Emma had always known that change didn't come easily, but hearing the whispers of doubt behind closed doors made her question how far they could truly push before running into a wall. One afternoon, while Emma was walking across campus, she ran into Professor Martin, a well-respected faculty member who had always been a staunch supporter of traditional academic values. He was standing outside the library, deep in conversation with a group of students when he spotted her. "Emma, a moment," he called out, his voice stern but not unfriendly. Emma paused, trying to read his expression. "Of course, Professor Martin. What's on your mind?" He didn't waste any time. "I've heard about your campaign, and frankly, I'm concerned. Mental health is important, yes, but I don't see how this fits with the university's mission. We're here to educate, to prepare students for the real world. What you're doing is admirable, but it's a distraction." Emma felt a knot tighten in her stomach. The last thing she needed was more opposition, especially from a respected professor like him. She took a deep breath before responding. "With all due respect, Professor Martin, I don't think you understand the gravity of the issue. Our students are struggling. They're facing challenges every day that most people don't see. Mental health isn't a distraction, it's an integral part of their overall well-being, which directly affects their ability to succeed in the classroom and beyond." Professor Martin raised an eyebrow, clearly unconvinced. "I understand that students face challenges, but there are ways to deal with that. There are professional services, and there's counseling. What you're doing feels more like an emotional band-aid than a long-term solution." Emma took a moment, choosing her words carefully. "I disagree, Professor. What we're doing isn't just about offering resources, it's about creating a culture of openness. We're breaking the stigma surrounding mental health. We're giving students a voice and showing them they're not alone. The longer we wait to address this openly, the more we allow students to suffer in silence." The tension between them hung thick in the air. Emma could feel her pulse quicken, but she refused to back down. She had fought too hard to get to this point. After a long silence, Professor Martin spoke again, though his tone had softened. "I'll give you this, Emma. You're passionate. I'll consider your perspective. But don't think for a second this is the end of the conversation. The administration might be backing you, but some of us believe this needs to be reconsidered." Emma nodded, trying to keep her composure. "Thank you, Professor. I appreciate you taking the time to listen." That encounter stayed with Emma for the rest of the day. It was clear that the opposition she faced wasn't just external, it was embedded within the very institution she was trying to improve. It was a reminder of just how deeply ingrained certain ideologies could be. But Emma wasn't about to let that stop her. She had a vision, and she knew it was bigger than any individual opposition. As the end of the semester approached, Emma's focus shifted toward one final event that would serve as the culmination of all their hard work, the end-of-semester Mental Health Awareness Gala. It was going to be a celebration of everything they had achieved, but also a platform to raise awareness, foster connections, and ensure the future of their campaign. Emma knew that if they could pull this off, it would be the perfect way to close out the semester on a high note. The team worked tirelessly to organize the gala. They secured a venue, reached out to local mental health advocates and experts, and organized performances and guest speakers. Emma felt a surge of pride as she watched the team pull everything together, each person giving their all to make the event a success. The night of the event, Emma arrived early to oversee the final details. The venue was beautifully decorated, with soft lighting, tables covered in white linen, and banners that read, "Together, we break the stigma." The energy in the room was electric, and Emma felt a quiet sense of awe as she realized how far they had come. As the night unfolded, Emma watched in amazement as students, faculty, and community members came together to support the cause. It was a celebration of resilience, of overcoming adversity, and of taking care of one another. She heard student after student speak out about how the campaign had impacted their lives, stories of personal struggles, breakthroughs, and newfound hope. But it wasn't just the students who were moved. Several faculty members who had initially been skeptical about the campaign stood at the back of the room, watching the students speak. Professor Martin, who had been one of her harshest critics, was among them. Emma couldn't help but wonder if his perspective had started to shift. As the gala came to a close, Emma stood on the stage, looking out over the crowd. She had a microphone in her hand, but for a moment, all she could do was take it in. This was more than just an event. It was a testament to what could happen when people came together for a common cause. "I want to thank all of you for being here tonight," Emma said, her voice carrying across the room. "This campaign has been a journey, and it's far from over. But tonight, we've proven that we can make a difference. We've proven that mental health matters. And most importantly, we've proven that we don't have to fight this battle alone." There was a pause before the room erupted into applause. Emma smiled, her heart full. They had done it. Together. The gala marked a turning point, not just for the campaign, but for Emma herself. She had fought through setbacks, criticism, and doubt to reach this point. And though the journey was far from over, she had learned that leadership wasn't about avoiding the tough moments. It was about facing them head-on, finding strength in the struggle, and never losing sight of the bigger picture. As Emma left the venue that night, she felt a quiet sense of confidence. She wasn't just leading a campaign anymore. She was part of something bigger, something that would continue to evolve and grow long after the semester ended. And that, she knew, was just the beginning. The weeks after the end of semester Mental Health Awareness Gala felt surreal. Emma and her team had worked tirelessly, and the event had exceeded even her highest expectations. The support from students, faculty, and the local community was overwhelming, and the campaign had gained not only visibility, but respect. But as Emma looked at the success they had achieved, she knew that it wasn't time to rest. It was time to think about what came next. It was a sunny Thursday afternoon when Emma received an unexpected email. The subject line was simple: a new opportunity. She opened it quickly, her fingers hovering over the keyboard as she read the message from Principal Harris. "Dear Emma, I hope this message finds you well. I wanted to personally reach out to commend you and your team for your efforts with the mental health campaign. It has become clear that you have successfully created a meaningful, positive impact on our campus. As a result, the administration would like to offer you an opportunity to expand your project further, beyond the university. We would like to discuss the possibility of you presenting your campaign to the Board of Trustees at the upcoming meeting. There is potential funding for an initiative like yours to extend to other campuses, potentially even beyond the state. Let me know if you would be open to a meeting to discuss this opportunity further. Best regards, Principal Harris." Emma stared at the screen in shock. This was not just another small victory, it was the chance of a lifetime. The idea that their campaign could expand to other campuses, that it could become a larger initiative, was beyond anything she had imagined. She read the email again to make sure she hadn't missed something. She picked up the phone immediately and dialed Harper's number. The phone rang twice before Harper picked up. "Hey, Emma. What's up?" "I just got an email from Principal Harris," Emma said, her voice trembling with excitement. "She wants to meet with me about expanding the campaign to other campuses. There's potential funding involved, too." Harper's response was immediate. "That's amazing. This is huge, Emma. I mean, This could change everything. I know, Emma exclaimed, her heart racing. I didn't expect this at all. I thought we were still in the early stages of proving ourselves. But it looks like they want to take it to the next level. Well, you've definitely earned it, Harper said, her voice warm with pride. So, what's next? Are you going to take the meeting? Absolutely. I'm meeting with Principal Harris next week to discuss it. The days leading up to the meeting felt like a blur. Emma spent every waking hour preparing, reading reports on successful university initiatives, gathering feedback from the students who had benefited most from their campaign, and brainstorming ways to present the idea of expansion. She knew this meeting could be the turning point that would determine the future of the campaign, and possibly her own future, too. When the day of the meeting finally arrived, Emma dressed in her best professional attire. She had learned a lot about leadership over the past months, but this felt different. This wasn't just about leading a small project anymore. This was about taking everything they had worked for and making it bigger, more impactful, more lasting. As Emma sat across from Principal Harris in her office, she felt the weight of the moment pressing down on her. Principal Harris was kind but firm, her eyes keenly observing Emma as she spoke. So, Emma, Principal Harris began, I've been following your progress closely, and I must say, I'm impressed. You've not only managed to make this campaign successful on our campus, but you've also inspired so many people along the way. Now, as I mentioned in my email, we're considering expanding this initiative to other campuses and possibly even to a statewide level. What are your thoughts on that? Emma felt her pulse quicken. She had prepared for this moment, but now that it was here, she had to make her case clearly and effectively. I think this is an incredible opportunity, Emma began, choosing her words carefully. We've seen firsthand how much of a difference our campaign has made on this campus. We've seen students speak out about their mental health struggles, attend workshops, and seek out resources. But we also know that this issue isn't unique to our campus, it's everywhere. Students across the state, across the country, are facing the same challenges. The stigma surrounding mental health is still pervasive, and there's so much work to be done. She paused, letting her words sink in. Principal Harris nodded, encouraging her to continue. If we have the resources and support to expand this campaign, we can start to change the conversation on a much larger scale, Emma went on. We can help students who might feel isolated or ashamed of their struggles. We can create a network of support that transcends individual campuses, that reaches students in need, wherever they are. This is more than just an initiative, it's a movement. Principal Harris looked thoughtful for a moment. I agree. But expansion comes with its own set of challenges. We would need to ensure that the program remains true to its mission, no matter how big it gets. And, of course, there would need to be significant funding and planning involved. Emma nodded confidently. I understand that. But I truly believe that this is the right time for this. The conversation around mental health is already starting to shift, but we need to keep that momentum going. If we can get the support we need, I'm confident that we can make this happen. The conversation continued for over an hour, with Emma discussing her plans for expansion, including ideas for outreach, partnerships, and sustainability. By the end of the meeting, Principal Harris was clearly impressed. I think you're onto something, Emma, she said with a smile. I'll present this to the board and see what we can do. We'll be in touch soon. As Emma left Principal Harris's office, she felt a mixture of excitement and disbelief. This was happening. This wasn't just a dream anymore. She had pushed through every obstacle, faced every doubt, and come out on the other side. Now, she was on the cusp of something far bigger than she had ever imagined. Over the next few days, Emma's phone buzzed nonstop. Every time it rang, her heart skipped a beat. Could this really be the moment they had been waiting for? When she finally received the email from Principal Harris, it confirmed everything. The board had approved the expansion plan, and funding was secured for the next phase of the campaign. They were officially going statewide, with plans to launch at several universities in the coming months. As Emma sat back in her chair, she allowed herself a moment to breathe. It had been a long journey, full of challenges, doubts, setbacks, and triumphs. But it was all worth it. She had always dreamed of making a difference, of using her voice to create change. And now she wasn't just a student with an idea. She was leading a movement, one that would change the way students across the country viewed and talked about mental health. Looking out the window of her dorm room, Emma smiled. This was only the beginning. The road ahead would be long, but it would be worth every step. And she was ready for whatever came next. The excitement that followed the approval of the statewide expansion was like nothing Emma had ever experienced. For weeks, the adrenaline kept her moving, pushing forward with new meetings, new ideas, and new plans. But beneath it all, there was a part of her that wondered, what now? What would it all mean in the grand scheme of things? What would happen when she was no longer the student leading the charge, but the founder of something much bigger, much more significant? The reality of the moment began to sink in as she stood on the stage at the student union, staring out at the packed room. The team, the faculty, the supporters, the students, it all seemed like a blur of faces. But as she looked out over the crowd, Emma realized that she wasn't just representing herself anymore. She was representing the voices of every student who had ever felt isolated, misunderstood, or ignored. She was carrying the weight of a movement much larger than herself. The event had been billed as the official kickoff ceremony for the statewide mental health initiative, and it had brought together universities from across the state. It was a chance for Emma and her team to share their vision, their success, and their plans for the future. The room was buzzing with energy, everyone eager to hear what came next. Emma stepped up to the podium, adjusting the microphone. Her heart beat rapidly, but she didn't let her nerves show. The journey that had started with a simple idea, one that she had once doubted, had brought her to this moment. She had worked with countless students, faculty, and experts, and now she stood here, representing not just a campaign, but a movement that was going to change the way people thought about mental health in college. "Good evening, everyone," she began, her voice steady. "Thank you all for being here tonight, and for supporting this vision that, for so many of us, started as just an idea. An idea that we believed could make a difference because we knew, in our hearts, that mental health matters." She paused, allowing her words to sink in. "When I first started this campaign, I had no idea what I was getting into. It wasn't about creating an award-winning project or being praised for some grand idea. It was about something much bigger. It was about giving students a voice. It was about changing the conversation. And most importantly, it was about breaking the silence." Emma's voice wavered slightly, but she quickly regained her composure. The journey wasn't easy. There were days when we felt like giving up, days when we doubted whether it was worth all the effort. We faced opposition. We fought for every inch. But what I learned, is that this is a fight worth fighting. Mental health is not a side issue. It's not something we can brush under the rug or ignore. It's something we have to confront head-on, for the sake of our students, for the sake of our future. The room was silent, hanging on her every word. Emma could feel the weight of the moment, but she didn't shy away from it. She embraced it, understanding that this wasn't just about her. It was about every person who had believed in the campaign and helped it grow. And so, Emma continued, "As we stand here today, we're not just celebrating our success. We're celebrating the power of unity. We're celebrating the fact that, together, we've changed the narrative. We've shown the world that mental health matters and that we won't back down." A loud round of applause erupted from the audience, and Emma felt a surge of emotion flood her chest. She had done it. They had done it. Together. The rest of the ceremony went smoothly, with speeches from various mental health professionals, faculty members, and even some of the students who had benefited from the campaign. It was a moment of reflection, of gratitude, and of hope. By the end of the night, Emma was exhausted, but she couldn't stop smiling. She had achieved more than she had ever thought possible. And while this was a monumental achievement, it was clear to her that the journey wasn't over, it was just beginning. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Emma and her team set out to coordinate the rollout of the campaign to other campuses. They worked with universities, local mental health organizations, and even state-level agencies to ensure the expansion was smooth and impactful. The response from the other campuses was overwhelmingly positive, and the initiative began to take on a life of its own. Emma also made sure to stay connected to the students, hearing their stories and understanding how the campaign had affected them. She spent time at each university, speaking at workshops, meeting with student groups, and listening to the challenges that students faced. It was during one of these trips that Emma met Jessica, a sophomore at a nearby university, who had a story that resonated deeply with Emma. Jessica shared how she had struggled with depression throughout high school and how, despite being accepted into college, she had felt increasingly isolated. She explained how she had been able to find help through the campaign's workshops, where she learned how to seek out resources and build a support network. "I never thought I could get better," Jessica said with tears in her eyes. "I felt like I was drowning. But this campaign, this whole initiative, it gave me the courage to ask for help. And now I feel like I can breathe again." Emma had to fight back her own tears as she listened. She had known the campaign was making a difference, but hearing stories like Jessica's solidified why she had fought so hard for this cause. It wasn't just about numbers or campaigns, it was about real people, real lives being changed. Months later, as the campaign began to flourish across the state, Emma received another email from Principal Harris. The subject line was simply, "A special invitation." She opened it and found an invitation to speak at a national mental health conference, a recognition that Emma had never dreamed of. The email also mentioned that she had been nominated for a prestigious leadership award. Emma felt a mix of disbelief and gratitude. She had never sought accolades, never expected to be in the spotlight. But to see that her work had gained this level of recognition left her in awe. The national conference was everything Emma had imagined and more. Standing before a large crowd of mental health professionals, activists, and other leaders, Emma felt a deep sense of pride and humility. She was a student still, only a few months removed from graduation, but here she was, leading a conversation about mental health that was impacting people across the nation. Her speech was met with a standing ovation. As she stepped off the stage, Emma was greeted by numerous individuals eager to collaborate and expand the campaign further. Sitting in the quiet of her hotel room that night, Emma reflected on how far she had come. From that first lonely dinner after graduation to sitting in front of a packed auditorium, speaking about something that had become her life's work, it had been an incredible journey. But it wasn't just about the accolades or the recognition. It was about the people, the students, the faculty, the friends, and the mentors who had helped her along the way. Emma knew that her work was far from finished. The fight for mental health awareness in college campuses was ongoing, and there was still so much left to do. But she also understood something profound. She had started a movement, one that was no longer just hers to carry. It was a collective effort, one that would continue to grow and evolve. As Emma prepared for the next chapter, she reflected on the lessons she had learned throughout the journey. 1. Leadership is about resilience. It's not about having all the answers, but about never giving up, even when things seem impossible. 2. Collaboration is key. Emma's success wasn't just her own. It was the result of the support, ideas, and hard work of countless people who believed in her vision. 3. True change takes time. Emma had to fight for every inch, but every step forward made a lasting difference. 4. Mental health matters. The most important lesson of all. People's lives are at stake, and every small action can help someone feel seen, heard, and supported. As Emma looked out the hotel window, she smiled. She had come a long way, but the best part? She was only getting started. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?